Deep beneath the layers of time, scattered across the globe, lie remnants of a world long forgotten. Prehistoric places that defy imagination and whisper secrets of ancient civilizations we barely understand. Hidden valleys, colossal stone structures, and underground labyrinths stand as silent witnesses to eras that predate recorded history. How were they built? Who walked these lands before us? And what truths have been buried, waiting to be uncovered? Journey with us to the edge of discovery, where the past feels almost alive. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into these unbelievable prehistoric wonders no one really knows about. Rising gently from the undulating plains of southeastern Anatolia, Karahan Tepe stretches across the horizon like a silent sentinel of a forgotten age. At first glance, it might appear as nothing more than a scattering of ancient stones, weathered by millennia of wind and sun. But as the eye lingers, patterns emerge. Towering pillars carved with intricate reliefs, enigmatic symbols etched deep into stone, and arrangements that suggest not mere construction, but ritual, purpose, and perhaps even devotion. The sheer scale of the site hints at a civilization both sophisticated and mysterious, one that predates the rise of recorded empires, reaching back to around 9,500 BC. Archaeologists have long noted the striking resemblance of Karahan Tepe's megalithic pillars to those of the nearby Göbekli Tepe. Yet, subtle differences suggest a distinct identity, an earlier, perhaps experimental phase of monumental construction. Each pillar, many adorned with depictions of animals, snakes coiling, boars charging, foxes crouching, tells a story that is tantalizingly just out of reach. Were these symbols purely decorative, or did they serve as a coded language, a symbolic map of cosmology, or even a guide to spiritual understanding? The absence of domestic structures adds another layer of intrigue. Unlike the settlements we associate with the Neolithic period, Karahan Tepe seems deliberately uninhabited, a place built not for living but for observing, performing, or communing. Walking through the site, one cannot help but notice the deliberate orientation of the stones. Some alignments hint at astronomical significance, pointing toward solstices or celestial events, though the evidence is inconclusive. Could these pillars have been an early observatory, a prehistoric temple marking the passage of stars and seasons? Or were they something more esoteric, a silent testimony of a ritualistic culture whose understanding of the cosmos has been lost to time? Scholars debate, weighing practical explanations against the allure of mystery, yet no definitive answer has emerged. Adding to the enigma are the carvings themselves. Some figures appear abstract, almost alien in their execution, defying easy categorization. There are motifs that seem to straddle the line between the natural and the symbolic. Animals intertwined with geometric forms, depictions that could be mythic narratives or perhaps records of experiences long forgotten. The deeper one studies these engravings, the more questions arise. Were these stories meant to educate, to warn, or simply to immortalize moments we can no longer comprehend? Moreover, Karahan Tepe sits in a region steeped in prehistoric activity. Its proximity to other monumental sites raises further questions about cultural exchange, technological capability, and societal organization in the late 10th millennium BC. How did people of this era manage such ambitious constructions with tools and methods we are only beginning to understand? What level of coordination, knowledge, or belief system drove them to raise these stones with such precision and care? And yet, despite centuries of study, much about Karahan Tepe remains stubbornly elusive. There are no written records to illuminate its purpose, no contemporary accounts to explain the vision behind it. Only the stones remain, enduring and inscrutable, standing as a testament to human ingenuity and curiosity. Visitors often report a strange sense of stillness, as if the site itself is aware of its own secrets, quietly guarding them against the march of time. What is clear is that Karahan Tepe challenges our assumptions about the prehistoric world. It forces us to reconsider timelines, to question the simplicity often attributed to early societies, and to wonder at the depth of symbolic thought and communal effort that existed thousands of years before the first cities of Mesopotamia or Palestine. And yet, as we trace our fingers along the carved stones, marveling at the craftsmanship and contemplating the unknown, we are left with a profound, lingering question. What truths lie buried beneath the soil, hidden in the spaces between these enigmatic pillars, waiting for those patient enough to uncover them? From the rolling plains where Karahan Tepe once stood, our journey continues a few dozen kilometers away to a less celebrated but equally enigmatic site, Sefer Tepe. At first glance, Sefer Tepe might seem unremarkable, a low mound rising subtly from the earth, partially overgrown with grasses and shrubs that sway in the wind. Yet beneath this unassuming surface lies a hidden chapter of human history, buried layer by layer over thousands of years. Walking along its gentle slopes, it is impossible not to feel a quiet tension, a sense that this is a place both familiar and unknowable, a fragment of the prehistoric world preserved in silence. Archaeological excavations have revealed that Sefer Tepe was occupied during the late Neolithic period, roughly contemporaneous with Karahan Tepe, yet it possesses a character entirely its own. Unlike the towering pillars and monumental stone carvings that dominate its more famous neighbor, Sefer Tepe speaks in subtler tones. Pits, small enclosures, and traces of structures that suggest habitation, perhaps temporary or seasonal, rather than monumental display. Early researchers described it as a small settlement, yet the layout, the careful positioning of certain features, and the enigmatic artifacts recovered hint at a complexity that challenges conventional assumptions about the societies of this era. One of the most striking aspects of Sefer Tepe is the presence of deeply carved stone platforms and carved niches, some forming geometric arrangements whose purpose remains a mystery. While it is tempting to view these as mere foundations or supports, some scholars suggest they may have served ritualistic or symbolic functions. Could these small, precise carvings represent a microcosm of the grand architectural visions seen at Karahan Tepe? Or perhaps they were entirely independent expressions of cosmology, designed to connect the living with forces we can scarcely comprehend today. Excavations have also uncovered fragments of figurines and ornaments, some depicting human forms with exaggerated features, others combining human and animal elements in ways that seem almost allegorical. These artifacts suggest a worldview that blended the familiar and the fantastical, where animals were not merely creatures of the natural world, but active participants in symbolic narratives. Were these objects talismans, teaching tools, or markers of status within a social hierarchy that we no longer fully understand? The truth is elusive. One of the most intriguing elements of Sefer Tepe lies beneath the surface. Circular pits, some lined with stone, and others with layers of clay, arranged in ways that defy immediate explanation. Some researchers propose that these were storage pits or hearths, ordinary domestic features, while others speculate that their precise alignments and unusual depths hint at ceremonial purposes. Could these pits have been used in rituals, to observe astronomical events, or even as sites for initiation or meditation? Each excavation raises new questions, revealing both ingenuity and intention, yet leaving the ultimate meaning shrouded in uncertainty. Sefer Tepe's location is equally fascinating. Perched on a modest rise, it commands a view of the surrounding valleys and hills, linking it visually and perhaps spiritually to nearby sites. Could its placement have been chosen for practical reasons? Proximity to water, fertile soil, or trade routes? Or was there a more profound motivation, a desire to situate human activity within a landscape imbued with significance? Its position, overlooked for centuries by travelers and scholars alike, now seems deliberate, almost deliberate in its quiet insistence on being noticed by those who look closely enough. Despite its smaller scale, Sefer Tepe shares one trait with Karahan Tepe: the tension between what we can explain and what remains mysterious. Each artifact, each carved stone, each alignment prompts new questions. How advanced were these societies in their understanding of construction, astronomy, and symbolic communication? Were their practices purely local, or part of a broader network of knowledge that spanned this entire region in the 10th millennium BC? The evidence hints at sophistication, yet the silence of the site keeps its story tantalizingly incomplete. Adding to the intrigue are the occasional carvings on stone slabs and the faint traces of painted pigments, details so subtle that they could easily be dismissed without careful observation. Some figures resemble animals common to the region: foxes, birds, and wild boars. Others are more abstract, geometric shapes that invite speculation. Were these representations of myth or a coded language, perhaps a record of oral histories transformed into visual form? Or might they have been intended as teaching tools, guiding initiates or children in ways we can no longer decipher? Sefer Tepe also raises questions about human movement and interaction. Its proximity to other Neolithic sites suggests that ideas, technology, and ritual practices may have traveled along hidden networks long before the rise of cities. Did the builders of Sefer Tepe know of Karahan Tepe, or of other settlements now lost to time? Did they participate in shared ceremonies, exchange symbols, or engage in communication that left no lasting record beyond the stones themselves? The gaps in our knowledge are profound, yet they invite us to imagine a world far richer and more connected than we often assume. Perhaps most haunting is the sense that Sefer Tepe, like its neighbors, is only partially revealed. Layers of earth cover structures and artifacts yet to be discovered. Future excavations may uncover new patterns, new carvings, or unexpected evidence of practices that challenge everything we think we know about the late Neolithic. Even today, the site holds its breath beneath the soil, as if waiting for patient eyes and careful hands to reveal what has been hidden for over 11,000 years. Walking among its gentle rises and depressions, one cannot help but feel a quiet awe. Sefer Tepe does not shout its secrets. It whispers them, inviting contemplation, careful observation, and reflection. We are left with fragments of understanding and a landscape that seems alive with history, yet still profoundly mysterious. How did these early communities conceive of their world, their place in it, and the forces beyond their comprehension? What remains buried, literally and metaphorically, beneath the surface of Sefer Tepe, waiting for discovery, understanding, or perhaps even wonder? As we linger on these questions, it becomes clear that Sefer Tepe, like Karahan Tepe before it, challenges not only our knowledge of the past, but our imagination. It is a place where human ingenuity, ritual, and mystery intersect, a silent monument to a world we are only beginning to glimpse. And though much has been uncovered, much remains unknown, leaving us to wonder at the depth, sophistication, and enduring enigma of this prehistoric landscape. From the subtle mounds of Sefer Tepe, our path winds eastward, deeper into the landscapes of southeastern Anatolia, where the terrain rises into rugged cliffs and rolling plateaus. Here, perched on rocky outcrops that overlook wide valleys, lies the Sayburc Relief Complex, a site that is at once visually striking and quietly enigmatic. Unlike the megalithic grandeur of Karahan Tepe or the modest, ritual-infused layers of Sefer Tepe, Sayburc presents itself in the form of intricate rock carvings etched directly into cliffs, a testament to human artistry that has endured for millennia, weathered but defiant against the passage of time. At first glance, the reliefs might seem straightforward: lines, figures, and symbols carved with remarkable precision into the stone face. Yet as the eye adjusts, a pattern emerges, one that hints at intention, ceremony, and perhaps a worldview that is only partially comprehensible to modern observers. Some carvings depict animals: ibexes poised mid-leap, birds with outstretched wings, and serpentine forms curling along natural fissures in the rock. Others are abstract: circles, spirals, and geometric patterns whose purpose has long eluded archaeologists. Were these images mere decoration, a reflection of the natural world, or were they imbued with symbolic meaning, representing spiritual beliefs or cosmological understanding? Dating these carvings proves challenging. The site likely dates back to the late Neolithic or early Chalcolithic periods, roughly between 9000 and 7000 BC, though precise timelines remain difficult to confirm. The sophistication of the carving suggests not a casual effort, but a deliberate, time-intensive undertaking. How did these early communities coordinate such work, and what drove them to leave their mark on stone so permanently? The answers remain speculative, yet the act itself speaks volumes about the significance of the location. Sayburc's setting contributes to its mysterious aura. The complex sits along a ridge that overlooks expansive plains, providing clear sightlines for miles. Some researchers suggest that the reliefs may have been intended as markers, territorial, ceremonial, or even navigational. Yet their intricate design implies more than practical function. There is a sense that these carvings were meant to be experienced, observed, and interpreted, perhaps by a select group within the community. Could the cliffs themselves have been considered sacred, transformed into a stage where ritual, memory, and artistry converged? Among the most puzzling features of Sayburc's are the abstract motifs that recur across different panels: circles enclosing smaller symbols, interlocking lines, and shapes that resemble constellations or celestial maps. Some archaeologists propose that these may have been proto-writing or symbolic language, a way to record stories, astronomical observations, or ritual instructions. Others argue that they could represent communal memory, a shared mythology encoded in stone for generations. Yet, without a Rosetta Stone of Neolithic cognition, interpretation remains conjectural, leaving the carvings to speak primarily through their visual impact, rather than any explicit narrative. The animal figures, too, carry their own intrigue. Certain depictions emphasize detail: the texture of fur, the curve of horns, the tension in a body mid-motion, while others are stylized, abstracted into symbolic forms. Was this a reflection of the artist's observational skill, or was abstraction intentional, designed to communicate ideas beyond the purely visual? Were these creatures revered, feared, or symbolic of cycles of life and death? The answers are tantalizingly close, yet frustratingly out of reach, hidden in the space between the carved lines. Adding another layer to the mystery, some reliefs are positioned in locations that are difficult to access, requiring careful climbing along narrow ledges or even precarious approaches from below. Why place carvings where they cannot easily be reached? Were they meant to be secret, seen only by those initiated into certain rituals or knowledge? Or were these positions chosen to interact with the light, casting shadows that shifted with the sun and moon, animating the carvings in a subtle dance of natural illumination? Each possibility opens new questions about the intentions of these prehistoric artisans. Sayburc also invites speculation about its relationship to nearby sites. Its carvings share certain motifs with other Neolithic and early Chalcolithic complexes in the region, suggesting networks of cultural exchange, shared ritual practices, or at least parallel symbolic traditions. Could these communities have been communicating across vast distances, exchanging ideas encoded in stone? Did they see themselves as part of a larger cultural landscape, one that stretched across valleys and plains, linking settlements, ceremonial sites, and natural features into a unified, symbolic world? Despite centuries of study, Sayburc retains an air of quiet defiance against understanding. Modern techniques, photogrammetry, 3D modeling, and pigment analysis have revealed previously unnoticed details, yet the core questions remain. Who carved these images, and why? What did they hope to preserve, communicate, or invoke? And perhaps most intriguingly, what lies hidden beyond what we can currently see? Layers of sediment, subtle carvings eroded by time, or even unknown panels may yet wait, silently guarding stories older than written history. As we stand before the cliffs of Sayburc, tracing the lines with our eyes, one cannot help but feel the weight of human intention stretched across millennia. There is a stillness here, a resonance that transcends the physical, suggesting that the creators understood something profound about their world, its cycles, its mysteries, and the human desire to leave a trace that endures. And yet, the deeper we look, the more elusive the answers become. What was their vision? What stories were meant to survive, and what has been lost forever? Sayburc challenges us to see beyond stone and time, to listen to the silence between the carvings, and to imagine a culture whose depth, sophistication, and symbolic understanding are only partially visible to us today. It is a place where mystery is not an adornment, but the very essence of the experience, inviting reflection, wonder, and the enduring question: how much of our prehistoric past remains hidden in plain sight, waiting for those patient enough to seek it? Leaving the vertical cliffs and carved surfaces of Sayburc behind, we move toward a landscape shaped by rolling hills and expansive plains, where the horizon stretches uninterrupted and the sky seems to meet the earth in a distant haze. Here rises Harbetsuvan Tepesi, a site that at first appears almost unremarkable. A gentle hill dotted with scattered stones, shallow depressions, and faint traces of human activity. Yet beneath this quiet surface, Harbetsuvan Tepesi conceals evidence of a prehistoric presence that is both intriguing and enigmatic, suggesting human ambition and ritual awareness long before the advent of urban civilization. The first impression of the site is subtle. Irregular stone alignments partially buried in the soil, clusters of megalithic fragments, and terraces etched into the hillside. Walking across the mound, the eye begins to detect patterns that hint at intention. These are not random stones left by chance or natural erosion. They are positioned, organized, and deliberately placed. Archaeologists have noted similarities to other Neolithic and Chalcolithic sites in the region, yet Harbetsuvan Tepesi carries a quiet individuality. Its scale is modest compared to Karahan Tepe, its reliefs subtler than those of Sayburc. But the cumulative effect is no less compelling, a landscape subtly inscribed with human presence, waiting to be interpreted. Excavations at Harbetsuvan Tepesi have uncovered a mix of features: circular and rectangular pits, small platforms, and stone arrangements whose purpose remains unclear. Some suggest they were foundations for structures, perhaps dwellings or storage areas. Others propose a more ritualistic interpretation, emphasizing the symmetry, alignment, and apparent orientation of certain features. Could these pits have been used to mark seasonal cycles, or as spaces for ceremonies and offerings? The absence of written records leaves only the physical traces, and the further one explores, the more questions arise. One of the most intriguing discoveries at Harbetsuvan Tepesi is the presence of carved stones that display animal motifs, abstract shapes, and geometric patterns. The depictions are less monumental than those at Karahan Tepe, yet they exhibit an unmistakable intentionality. Snakes curl along the edges of platforms, boars are etched in mid-motion, and abstract spirals suggest cycles or movement. Some researchers propose that these carvings encode symbolic knowledge, perhaps reflecting cosmology, mythology, or communal memory. Others interpret them as purely decorative, though even this would require considerable skill and effort, suggesting that these marks were significant to those who made them. The layout of Harbetsuvan Tepesi adds to its mystery. Certain stones and terraces are aligned along axes that correspond loosely with cardinal directions, and some appear to mark the rising and setting sun at solstices. Were these alignments intentional, hinting at an understanding of astronomical cycles, or merely coincidental? If intentional, what did this knowledge mean to the builders? How did they conceptualize time, ritual, and the movement of celestial bodies? Each stone seems to invite us to consider not only its practical purpose, but the worldview that created it. Another feature that distinguishes Harbetsuvan Tepesi is its subtle interplay with the surrounding landscape. The hill overlooks a series of valleys and smaller mounds, suggesting that its position may have been chosen for strategic, symbolic, or spiritual reasons. Did the inhabitants see themselves as part of a broader network of sites across the region, interconnected by ritual pathways, shared observances, or social networks? Could the hill itself have served as a vantage point, a place for observation, or a symbolic marker in the vast prehistoric landscape? These questions, like the site itself, resist easy answers. Artifacts recovered from the site, ceramic fragments, flint tools, and small figurines further complicate the narrative. The tools demonstrate practical daily life, yet the figurines, some depicting humans, others anthropomorphic animal hybrids, suggest symbolic or ritualistic practice. What stories were these objects meant to tell? Were they guides for spiritual practice, educational tools, or expressions of myth and memory? And what of the missing pieces, the layers yet to be unearthed, or the marks that have eroded with the passage of millennia? Harbetsuvan Tepesi also prompts reflection on the nature of prehistoric human ambition. Unlike the towering pillars of Karahan Tepe or the dramatic cliff reliefs of Sayburc, this site conveys subtlety, the power of placement, orientation, and symbolic arrangement without imposing grandiosity. Perhaps this speaks to a culture that valued integration with the landscape, a society in which human activity and natural surroundings were intertwined in ways we can only begin to imagine. The very modesty of the site enhances its allure, inviting careful observation, interpretation, and contemplation. Even with modern archaeological methods, geophysical surveys, remote sensing, and meticulous excavation, much about Harbetsuvan Tepesi remains uncertain. Layers of soil, sediment, and time obscure the full scope of human activity. Could there be hidden structures beneath the mound? Patterns of stone yet unrecognized? Or perhaps evidence of ritual practices that have left no physical trace? Each discovery opens the door to new hypotheses while reinforcing the sense of a story only partially revealed. Standing on Harbetsuvan Tepesi today, one is struck by the stillness and quiet resonance of the site. The wind whispers through the scattered stones, and the distant plains stretch uninterrupted, as if inviting reflection on the lives of those who once walked here. What knowledge, beliefs, and practices have been lost to time? How did these early communities perceive the world, their place in it, and the forces beyond their understanding? The answers may remain elusive, yet the hill itself offers a subtle, enduring invitation to look closely, to wonder, and to imagine a past both familiar and profoundly mysterious. Harbetsuvan Tepesi, in its quiet dignity, reminds us that prehistoric sites do not always announce themselves with grandeur. Sometimes, the most profound mysteries are whispered, etched in stone and soil, waiting for those patient enough to see, to question and to imagine. And as we gaze across its terraces, pits, and carvings, one cannot help but ask, what other secrets lie hidden beneath the surface, waiting to reshape our understanding of a world that existed long before recorded history? From the quiet terraces of Harbetsuvan Tepesi, our journey continues westward across the undulating plains and low ridges of southeastern Anatolia, where the horizon stretches wide and the sun casts long shadows over a landscape that has changed little in millennia. Here, rising subtly from the earth, is Cakmaktepe, a site that at first glance might appear deceptively simple. A modest mound, partially overgrown with scrub and grass, dotted with scattered stones and faint depressions. Yet beneath this unassuming exterior, Cakmaktepe conceals evidence of human activity that reaches back into the deep prehistory of the region, a site that invites patience, attention, and imagination to understand its silent story. Walking across the mound, one begins to notice patterns in the stones and terrain. Shallow enclosures, low platforms, and clusters of rocks hint at deliberate human placement. Unlike Karahan Tepe's towering pillars or Sayburc's dramatic reliefs, Cakmaktepe speaks with subtlety, a quiet language of spatial arrangement and orientation. Archaeologists have suggested that these features may have served multiple purposes: domestic, ritual, or symbolic. Yet the deliberate care evident in their positioning raises questions beyond practicality. Could these stone formations have been ceremonial markers, guiding communal gatherings or ritual practices? Or were they intended as a reflection of the builder's understanding of the natural and celestial world? Among the most intriguing discoveries at Cakmaktepe are the carved stones and small sculptural fragments, some depicting animals, others abstract patterns, and a few with geometric motifs that echo symbolic traditions found at nearby Neolithic sites. The animal figures are particularly compelling. Foxes crouch as if ready to spring, boars charge with a sense of motion captured in stone, and birds seem suspended in flight along carved edges. Were these representations purely decorative, or were they imbued with meaning, tales of hunting, mythology, or spiritual belief? Could these carvings have functioned as storytelling devices, conveying knowledge and memory across generations? The spatial arrangement of Cakmaktepe adds another layer of fascination. Certain stone alignments suggest intentional orientation, possibly corresponding to seasonal or celestial markers. Some researchers have speculated that the site could have functioned as an early observatory or calendar system, where the positions of the sun, moon, or stars guided communal events or ritual cycles. Others propose a more symbolic interpretation, seeing the alignments as reflecting cosmological or spiritual principles rather than practical timekeeping. The truth may lie somewhere in between, or in dimensions we have yet to recognize. Artifacts recovered from the site further deepen the sense of mystery. Flint tools and fragments of pottery indicate everyday life, while small figurines, human, animal, and hybrid forms, hint at ritual or symbolic practice. The combination of practical and symbolic elements suggests a society attuned to both survival and meaning, one that sought to harmonize its physical environment with its spiritual or cultural understanding. But without written records, the purpose and significance of these artifacts remain largely interpretive, open to hypothesis yet resolutely silent on definitive explanation. Cakmaktepe also occupies a remarkable position within its surrounding landscape. Perched on a gentle rise, the mound offers a broad view of adjacent valleys and smaller hills. This vantage point may have been selected for practical reasons: visibility, defense, or access to resources, but it could also carry symbolic significance. Did the builders perceive this location as a threshold between human activity and the broader forces of nature or cosmos? Could the site have served as a ritual focal point within a network of prehistoric communities, linking other nearby settlements, ceremonial mounds, or observation points into a coordinated spatial and cultural system. Adding to the enigma are the traces of erosion and sediment deposition, which obscure some features while preserving others in almost perfect detail. Some stone platforms are partially buried, hinting at structures that may have been larger or more complex than what is visible today. Could further excavation reveal additional carvings, hidden chambers, or evidence of ceremonial practices now lost to time? Even subtle depressions and terraces invite speculation. Were they foundations, ritual spaces, or symbolic markers aligned to celestial or terrestrial features? The interplay of natural processes and human design makes the site a puzzle, one that requires both careful observation and imaginative consideration. The abstract motifs at Cakmaktepe are particularly compelling. Spirals, interlocking lines, and geometric figures evoke comparisons with symbolic traditions across the region, suggesting that the site may have been part of a broader network of early symbolic expression. Were these forms intended to convey information, preserve memory, or facilitate communal rites? Or were they an artistic exploration, a reflection of an aesthetic sensibility intertwined with spiritual practice? The lack of definitive context allows the mystery to speak for itself, inviting careful contemplation rather than hasty conclusions. Even today, as sunlight shifts across the mound, casting shadows that play across stone and terrace, Cakmaktepe seems to breathe with the rhythm of time. The wind whispers across the low hills, the distant plains stretch uninterrupted, and the scattered stones bear witness to lives lived, rituals performed, and knowledge passed down in ways we are only beginning to grasp. Walking the site, one cannot help but feel a connection to these ancient builders, a sense of continuity between past and present that transcends the millennia. Cakmaktepe challenges our assumptions about prehistoric societies. It reminds us that complexity and intentionality were not reserved for monumental pillars or dramatic cliff carvings. Even modest sites could hold profound meaning. It asks us to consider how early communities understood their world, the forces they sought to engage with, and the stories they endeavored to preserve. And, perhaps most compellingly, it leaves us with an enduring question. What other secrets lie buried beneath its terraces and scattered stones, waiting for patient eyes to uncover, waiting to expand our understanding of a world long vanished but still whispering through the stones? Leaving behind the subtle terraces and quiet stones of Cakmaktepe, our journey carries us thousands of kilometers east to the arid plains of northern China. Here, amid windswept hills and the distant curve of the Lus Plateau, stands the Shimao stone-walled city, a monumental site that, even in its ruined state, conveys a sense of scale, ingenuity, and mystery few ancient settlements can match. From a distance, the city resembles a jagged outline etched into the earth, its massive walls and stone foundations rising like a ghostly citadel against the horizon. But as one approaches, the enormity of its construction and the sophistication of its layout become astonishingly clear. Shimao was first occupied around 2300 BC during the late Neolithic, and its fortifications, some stretching hundreds of meters in length and reaching impressive heights, suggest a society capable of extraordinary coordination and technical skill. The walls are built from carefully shaped stones, tightly fitted together without mortar, their construction evoking questions about the methods and tools employed by a civilization that predates the widespread use of metal in the region. Was this a city designed for defense, for ritual, or for something more symbolic, intended to project power and cohesion across the surrounding landscape? The scale alone is difficult to reconcile with the technological capabilities traditionally attributed to this period. One of the most striking features of Shimao is the network of interior structures within its walls. Residential compounds, ceremonial spaces, and plazas have been uncovered, along with traces of what appear to be sacrificial pits, jade artifacts, and elaborate stone carvings. The presence of imported materials, such as jade from distant regions, points to long-range trade or communication networks previously underestimated in this era. Could Shimao have been a hub of commerce, a ceremonial center, or both? And if trade networks were so extensive, what does this imply about the social and political organization of a culture long thought to be relatively localized? The city's outer walls themselves add to its mystery. Some segments are over 20 meters thick, reinforced by layers of stone and earth, forming a formidable barrier against intrusion. Within these walls, towers and bastions are positioned with remarkable precision, suggesting not only defensive foresight, but an understanding of geometry and urban planning that challenges assumptions about Neolithic societies. Yet, despite its apparent military sophistication, there is little evidence of prolonged conflict at the site. Was Shimao fortified against human enemies, or was its construction driven by symbolic or ceremonial imperatives, a display of strength and cohesion rather than a functional military necessity? Perhaps most intriguing are the unusual features discovered near the northern gates: massive stone blades, carefully arranged terraces, and carvings that some interpret as ritualistic or symbolic. Human and animal bones found in these areas suggest sacrificial practices, though the scale and purpose of these rituals remain debated. Were these ceremonies intended to sanctify the city, honor deities, or maintain cosmic balance? Or might they reflect an entirely different set of beliefs, now lost to time, that guided the social and spiritual life of Shimao's inhabitants? The evidence is tantalizing, yet incomplete, leaving room for questions that resist easy answers. The layout of Shimao also hints at astronomical awareness. Some structures and alignments appear to correspond to solar and lunar cycles, or to significant topographical markers in the surrounding plateau. Could these orientations have guided agricultural, ritual, or calendrical practices? If so, it would suggest a sophisticated observational knowledge embedded into the very architecture of the city, knowledge that we are only beginning to understand. And if these alignments were deliberate, what cultural or spiritual insights did they reflect, and how were they integrated into daily life? Artifacts recovered from the site underscore the complexity of its society. Jade scepters, stone implements, and intricately carved objects indicate not only high craftsmanship, but also symbolic or ritualistic importance. The presence of foreign materials hints at interactions across vast distances, raising questions about the extent of cultural exchange, social hierarchies, and knowledge networks in Neolithic East Asia. How did these people organize labor, resources, and expertise to create such a monumental city? And why did this thriving center ultimately vanish, leaving behind only its stones, terraces, and enigmatic traces of ritual activity? Even the city's sudden abandonment deepens the mystery. Layers of destruction and signs of rapid depopulation suggest that Shimao did not decline slowly, but rather experienced a dramatic transformation. Some researchers propose environmental shifts, resource depletion, or internal social upheaval as possible causes, but none can fully explain the scale or suddenness of the departure. The city's stones remain, weathered yet imposing, as if silently guarding the story of a civilization that flourished, then disappeared, leaving only questions behind. As one walks among the massive walls and terraces of Shimao, it is impossible not to sense the ambition and vision of its builders. Every stone, every alignment, every artifact hints at a society capable of extraordinary cooperation, technical skill, and symbolic thought. And yet, despite extensive study, the deeper meanings behind its construction, layout, and ritual spaces remain elusive. What was the guiding vision that led to such monumental work? How did the people of Shimao conceive of their world, their place within it, and the forces they sought to engage through ritual and architecture. Shimao's stone-walled city stands today as both a testament and a question, a sprawling, enduring monument to human ingenuity, creativity, and ritual practice. It invites us to contemplate the achievements of societies that existed thousands of years before recorded empires, and to imagine a world of ambition, artistry, and mystery that has left only stone and memory as witnesses. And as we consider the walls, terraces, and carvings that endure, we are compelled to ask, what other secrets remain buried beneath the city, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who are patient, observant, and willing to listen to the whispers of an ancient past? From the vast stone fortifications of Shimao, we now journey southward, across river valleys and fertile plains, to a site that has captivated archaeologists and historians alike for decades: the Sanxingdui Sacrificial Pits. Nestled near the banks of the Yazi River in Sichuan province, this site presents a startlingly different vision of prehistoric culture, one not defined by walls or urban planning, but by ritual, artistry, and profound symbolic expression. As the landscape opens before the visitor, the fertile fields give way to depressions and subtle rises in the soil. Unassuming at first, yet these are the remnants of some of the most extraordinary ceremonial deposits ever discovered. The first discovery of Sanxingdui's pits in the 1920s was followed by decades of excavation, revealing a trove of bronze, jade, gold, and ivory artifacts, many of which had been intentionally buried. Among the most striking finds are the sacrificial pits themselves, large, carefully dug depressions filled with fragments of ritual objects, broken statues, and even evidence of burnt offerings. The scale of these pits, some several meters across and layered with objects in complex arrangements, suggests deliberate design, purpose, and ceremony. Why were these items buried in such a way rather than preserved, displayed, or reused? What social or spiritual imperatives drove these acts of deposition? One of the most remarkable aspects of Sanxingdui is the artistry of the objects themselves. Bronze masks with exaggerated eyes, intricate figurines, and stylized animal forms dominate the assemblages, each imbued with a sense of both grandeur and enigma. Some masks feature eyes so large they seem almost otherworldly, evoking a gaze that transcends the human scale. Were these objects created to represent deities, ancestors, or supernatural beings? And if so, what beliefs and rituals guided their production and subsequent burial? The precision, scale, and imaginative power of these creations challenge conventional assumptions about what Neolithic societies could achieve, suggesting a sophisticated culture with symbolic and spiritual depth far beyond what might have been expected in this period. The pits themselves reveal layers of intention. Objects are often arranged in deliberate sequences: larger statues positioned at the center, smaller artifacts at the periphery, sometimes with evidence of burnt offerings or other materials intermixed. This raises questions about the ritual logic underpinning the burials. Were these offerings meant to appease spirits, commemorate events, or mark a transition in time or leadership? Could the arrangement of objects reflect a cosmology, a map of the heavens, or symbolic representations of the human and natural worlds? The careful layering and diversity of materials indicate not randomness, but a profound ritual order that has been lost to us, leaving only fragments to be interpreted. Another element that deepens the mystery of Sanxingdui is the sudden disappearance of its culture. Unlike Shimao or Cakmaktepe, where evidence of settlement, construction, and abandonment can be traced through successive layers, the civilization associated with Sanxingdui seems to vanish from the archaeological record around 1200 BC. What circumstances prompted this dramatic transformation? Environmental change, social upheaval, or external pressure may have played a role, yet the precise reasons remain unknown. The sacrificial pits themselves, with their deliberate destruction and burial of precious objects, may hint at a culture deliberately closing a chapter, preserving its memory and ritual, even as it withdrew or disappeared. Or the bronze artifacts, in particular, raise further questions about technological capability and symbolic purpose. Some pieces are enormous, requiring complex casting techniques, while others display intricate ornamentation, including depictions of mythological creatures and anthropomorphic figures. How did artisans of this era acquire the knowledge and resources necessary for such work? Were these objects purely ceremonial, or did they hold a functional role in governance, social hierarchy, or spiritual practice? And why were so many of them broken and buried, rather than left intact? The answers elude us, yet the objects themselves speak powerfully of a culture both complex and enigmatic. Sanxingdui's location adds another layer to the intrigue. Situated near rivers and fertile land, it would have supported substantial populations and agricultural activity. Yet its monumental works and sacrificial practices suggest a focus on ceremonial, symbolic, or religious activity that transcended mere subsistence. Was the city and its surrounding region a center of spiritual authority, drawing communities together for ritual observance? Or were these practices localized, expressions of a unique worldview that existed only in this particular place and time? The distribution and scale of the sacrificial pits imply a society capable of coordinating effort across multiple sites, hinting at social organization and cultural sophistication rarely acknowledged in late Neolithic China. As one observes the remnants of Sanxingdui today, the scale and craftsmanship are almost overwhelming. Each fragment, each mask, each bronze piece bears silent witness to creativity, ritual, and belief, yet also to absence, the missing narrative, the vanished culture, and the unanswered questions that haunt the site. The pits themselves, layered with objects and ash, form a record not of daily life, but of spiritual and symbolic endeavor, a testament to the values and concerns of a people who expressed their beliefs through deliberate, permanent acts of deposition. Standing amidst the fields where these sacrificial pits lie, one cannot help but feel both awe and humility. The scale, sophistication, and mystery of Sanxingdui challenge our understanding of what prehistoric societies could achieve, inviting reflection on human creativity, spirituality, and the ways in which culture can leave traces that are both tangible and elusive. And yet, for all that has been uncovered, the site retains a profound silence. What other pits remain undiscovered beneath the soil? What stories, rituals, and beliefs lie hidden, waiting to be revealed? Sanxingdui speaks in fragments, in bronze and jade, yet its full message remains tantalizingly out of reach. A reminder that some mysteries of our prehistoric past endure, inviting wonder and reflection for generations to come. From the fertile river plains of Sichuan, where the Sanxingdui sacrificial pits whisper of vanished rituals, we journey westward across continents and millennia, arriving in Central Europe. Here, on the rolling landscapes of Saxony-Anhalt, Germany, lies the Goseck site, home to the Kreisgrabenanlagen, or circular enclosures, that date back to around 4,900 BC. At first glance, the Goseck enclosures may appear deceptively simple, concentric ditches and palisades etched into the earth, forming a geometric pattern visible primarily from above. Yet the subtlety of the design belies its significance, a precision that hints at advanced astronomical knowledge, ceremonial practice, and communal effort in the late Neolithic. Walking the grassy mounds and shallow ditches today, one cannot help but notice the rhythm of the site, the interplay of earth and space, the circular symmetry, the carefully positioned entrances. The northern, eastern, and southern gateways are aligned with the rising and setting sun at solstices, suggesting that the builders were acutely aware of celestial cycles. Was this knowledge purely practical, intended to guide agricultural work, or did it serve a symbolic or spiritual function, connecting the human community with cosmic forces? The precision of these alignments raises profound questions about the observational and mathematical capabilities of a society living over 6,000 years ago. Excavations have revealed that the enclosures were fortified with wooden palisades, often buried within ditches that themselves required significant labor to construct. The effort involved in creating such structures indicates not only coordinated labor, but also a shared vision and purpose. What motivated this collaboration? Was it purely social cohesion, or were these enclosures sites of ritual, gathering, or early proto-religious observance? The concentric design, repeated across multiple Neolithic sites in Central Europe, suggests a symbolic language, perhaps a visual representation of the world, of cosmology, or of community itself. Artifacts uncovered within and around the Goseck circles deepen the mystery. Pottery fragments, tools, and occasional ritual deposits hint at human activity that went beyond mere construction. Some have suggested that these enclosures served as ceremonial centers, places where seasonal events were marked, and where communities came together to perform rituals that bound them socially and spiritually. But why these precise, circular designs? And why invest such labor in structures that, unlike settlements, were not meant for habitation? Could these sites have functioned as sacred theaters, where astronomical observation, ritual, and communal identity converged? The interplay of geometry and astronomy at Goseck is particularly compelling. The exactness with which the entrances align with solstices suggests careful observation over generations. How did Neolithic observers measure the movement of the sun with such precision? Did they possess a conceptual understanding of time and cycles, encoded in the earth itself? Some researchers have even speculated that these enclosures may have served as early calendars, or as a way to harmonize human activity with cosmic rhythms. And yet, despite these plausible interpretations, the full purpose of the site remains enigmatic, leaving room for wonder and speculation. Another intriguing aspect of Goseck is its relationship with the surrounding landscape. Positioned on slightly elevated terrain, the enclosures offer broad sightlines across the plain, suggesting that their placement was intentional. Were these vantage points chosen to maximize visibility of celestial events, or to connect the human community with distant features in the landscape? And could the circular form itself hold symbolic meaning, representing cycles of life, death, and renewal, or the unbroken relationship between Earth, sky, and humanity? The repeated motifs of circularity in European Neolithic enclosures echo patterns found at sites across the continent, from southern France to Poland, suggesting a shared symbolic tradition. Yet Goseck remains unique in the sophistication of its astronomical alignment. Were these communities exchanging knowledge across vast distances, creating a network of shared ritual and observation? Or did similar designs emerge independently, reflecting universal human responses to cycles of nature and the sky above? The mystery invites reflection on the capabilities, imagination, and cosmological awareness of societies that predate written records by millennia. Even today, the silence of the Goseck circles is profound. Standing within the enclosures, one can sense the rhythm of labor, observation, and ceremony that once took place here. The sun rises and sets through the gateways as it did thousands of years ago, and the circular ditches and palisades remain as enduring markers of human endeavor, knowledge, and belief. Yet, despite modern archaeological investigation, many questions remain unanswered. What rituals were performed here? How did these ceremonies structure social and spiritual life? And what knowledge, encoded in earth and timber, has been lost to time? The Kreisgrabenanlagen of Goseck remind us that prehistoric sites need not be monumental to be profound. Through subtlety, symmetry, and alignment, These early communities created spaces that reflect their understanding of the cosmos, their social structures, and their cultural imagination. And perhaps most strikingly, they challenge us to see beyond stone and earthworks, to consider the invisible forces of belief, observation, and ritual that shaped human experience millennia ago. As we trace the ditches and step carefully along the faint outlines of palisades, we are left with a quiet, lingering question. What else lies hidden beneath the soil of Goseck, waiting to reveal its secrets? What patterns, objects, or arrangements have yet to be uncovered that might further illuminate the minds, skills, and beliefs of the people who created these circles? The answers remain elusive, yet the enclosures themselves continue to speak across time, inviting us to wonder, reflect, and imagine the profound intelligence and intention of our distant ancestors. From the orderly circular ditches of Goseck, where human hands carved alignment with the sun, our journey now carries us across the Atlantic to the alluvial plains of northeastern Louisiana in the United States. Here, in the low, swampy landscape shaped by the Mississippi River, lies Watson Brake, a site that quietly challenges our assumptions about prehistoric North America. At first glance, it seems unremarkable. Gently rolling mounds of earth, arranged in a loose oval, barely distinguishable from the surrounding terrain. Yet beneath these modest rises lies one of the oldest known mound complexes in the Americas, a monument to human effort dating back to around 3,500 BC, over a millennium before the Egyptian pyramids. Walking across the site today, one can sense the rhythm of its construction, even without the original tools or witnesses. The mounds are arranged in a deliberate pattern. 12 elevated earthworks connected by ridges forming a rough oval more than 900 meters in diameter. The scale is modest compared to later Mississippian cities, but the organization is striking, reflecting planning, coordination, and sustained labor over generations. Who were the people who built these mounds? What motivated them to organize the landscape in such a precise way, long before agriculture became the dominant mode of life in the region? Watson Brake is especially remarkable because it predates what we typically consider complex societies in North America. Excavations have revealed minimal evidence of permanent settlement, no large houses or long-term domestic structures. Yet the labor invested in moving thousands of cubic meters of earth suggests a society capable of remarkable social organization. Could the construction have been purely ceremonial, a communal expression of spirituality, or did it serve a function now lost to time? And if this society could coordinate on such a scale without urban infrastructure, what does that tell us about the social dynamics, beliefs, and communication systems of these early peoples? The alignment and placement of the mounds add to the intrigue. Some researchers have speculated that the arrangement may reflect seasonal cycles, celestial observations, or ritual processions. Others focus on the possibility that the oval shape had symbolic meaning, perhaps representing the community's cosmology or its conception of the world. If these alignments were intentional, how was this knowledge transmitted across generations, long before writing or formal education? And what might these patterns have meant to the people who lived in and around the site, shaping their social and spiritual experiences? Artifacts recovered from Watson Brake are scarce, yet telling. Stone tools, small fragments of pottery, and occasional fire-cracked rock indicate activity. Yet the site's primary significance seems to lie in the earthworks themselves rather than everyday domestic life. Some scholars have proposed that these earthworks functioned as ceremonial gathering spaces, perhaps for marking seasonal events, performing rituals, or structuring social cohesion. But without written records, the precise meaning of these gatherings and the beliefs underpinning them remains speculative. Each mound, ridge, and depression is a silent marker, a fragment of a story only partially revealed. The environmental context also deepens the mystery. Watson Brake sits in a region prone to flooding, with the surrounding landscape shifting over millennia. Did the builders consider these changes in planning the site, elevating mounds to survive seasonal inundation, or was the landscape itself imbued with symbolic significance? And what of the people themselves, hunter-gatherers, semi-sedentary groups, or communities in transition toward more permanent settlement? The scale and coordination required for the mounds suggest social complexity, yet the evidence of domestic life is minimal, leaving a tension between visible labor and invisible social structure. Another fascinating aspect of Watson Brake is its longevity. Evidence indicates that construction was not a one-time event, but occurred over centuries, with successive generations adding, modifying, and refining the mounds. This sustained engagement suggests not fleeting ambition, but a deeply rooted cultural practice. What motivated this enduring effort? Was it devotion to a shared belief system, ancestral reverence, or the creation of a landmark to define communal identity? And how did knowledge, techniques, and ceremonial meaning pass from one generation to the next without written records? Even in modern times, Watson Brake evokes a sense of quiet awe. Standing atop one of the mounds, the surrounding floodplain stretches outward, and the earth itself seems inscribed with human intent. The scale is not monumental in the way of pyramids or stone circles, yet it speaks of something equally profound: the capacity of early human communities to shape their environment, express belief, and sustain collective purpose over centuries. And yet, the site's subtlety also leaves space for mystery. Why this precise arrangement of mounds? What rituals were performed here, and what meanings did they hold? Watson Brake challenges conventional narratives of prehistoric North America. It reminds us that monumental effort, symbolic expression, and social complexity are not exclusive to urban centers or hierarchical societies. Through earth, sweat, and communal vision, the builders of Watson Brake left a record that endures in silence, a testament to ingenuity and ritual practice that predates most recorded civilizations. And still, the site holds secrets, layers of earth yet unexcavated, subtle alignments unnoticed, ceremonial patterns lost to time. As we trace the ridges and depressions of Watson Brake, we are confronted with both human achievement and enduring enigma. What other stories lie beneath its mounds, waiting to reveal the beliefs, aspirations, and practices of its builders? How did a society without cities or written language achieve such coordinated labor over centuries? Watson Brake speaks through Earth itself, a silent, enduring monument to prehistoric imagination, and invites us to wonder at the depth, patience, and creativity of a people who shaped the land in ways that continue to resonate across millennia. From the subtle mounds of Watson Brake, where earth and intention intertwine across the floodplains of Louisiana, we travel just a few dozen kilometers to another remarkable site, one that magnifies the scale and ambition of prehistoric North American mound building, the Poverty Point Ridge Complex. Unlike Watson Brake, which speaks in quiet, modest rises and gently undulating mounds, Poverty Point presents itself as a grand, sprawling vision etched into the landscape, a series of massive ridges and concentric earthworks that extend for more than 3,500 meters across the Mississippi alluvial plain. From the air, the site reveals an extraordinary symmetry: 6 crescent-shaped ridges radiating outward from a central plaza, enclosing low-lying areas that were likely used for habitation and ceremonial activity. Walking across Poverty Point today, the enormity of human effort is impossible to ignore. The ridges rise several meters above the surrounding plain, their edges carefully maintained and arranged with apparent precision. To create this complex, the builders moved an estimated 1.3 million cubic meters of earth, transporting it from distant sources with basket and shoulder, a staggering feat for a society without metal tools or draft animals. What motivated such monumental labor? Was it devotion, ritual, social cohesion, or a combination of all three? And how did communities coordinate construction over what must have been generations, ensuring the placement of each mound and ridge aligned with a larger plan? At the heart of Poverty Point lies a central plaza, an open area measuring over 15 hectares, which may have served as a stage for ritual, social gathering, or astronomical observation. Surrounding the plaza, the ridges curve outward with remarkable geometric accuracy, forming arcs that, to the careful eye, appear intentionally oriented toward the cardinal points and perhaps other celestial events. Were these alignments practical, ceremonial, or both? Did the builders of Poverty Point perceive patterns in the heavens and translate them into earthworks that encoded their knowledge of time, seasonality, and ritual practice? The answer remains tantalizingly out of reach. Yet, the very presence of such careful design speaks volumes about the sophistication of these early communities. Artifacts found throughout the site suggest a complex and far-reaching social network. Thousands of objects, including stone beads, polished axes, cooking stones, and intricately carved figurines, have been unearthed, some of which originate from quarries and forests hundreds of kilometers away. This implies trade or exchange networks of unprecedented scale for this time, connecting communities across vast distances. How did such societies coordinate long-distance procurement of materials? And what cultural or ceremonial imperatives drove these exchanges? Were these objects offerings, tools, or symbols of social status, carefully deposited along the ridges and central plaza as part of ritualized activity? Perhaps the most striking feature of Poverty Point is its demonstration of spatial planning and communal vision. The ridges are not random mounds. They follow precise curves and radii, forming a cohesive pattern that is visible only when viewed in its entirety. Constructing such geometry would have required careful measurement, an understanding of proportion, and the ability to maintain alignment across vast distances. How did these prehistoric builders achieve such precision without modern surveying tools? And what knowledge, encoded in their work, has been lost with the passage of time? The arrangement of the ridges and the scale of labor also raises intriguing questions about social organization. To construct Poverty Point, hundreds, perhaps thousands, of individuals would have needed to cooperate over multiple generations. This implies a level of social cohesion and leadership not usually attributed to hunter-gatherer societies of this period. Were these early inhabitants experimenting with forms of governance, ritual authority, or social hierarchy? And how did the interplay of labor, ceremonial practice, and spatial design shape their identity as a community? The earth itself seems to hold the answers, but they remain buried, layered in soil and memory. Adding another layer of mystery is the evidence of ritual deposition throughout the site. Excavations have revealed deliberately broken artifacts, burned objects, and clay figurines placed within the ridges and plaza. Such practices suggest ceremonial or symbolic action beyond the mere construction of earthworks. Were these offerings intended to communicate with ancestors or deities? Did they mark life cycles, seasonal transitions, or communal events? And why did the builders invest such meticulous care in arranging and depositing objects across vast, elevated ridges rather than within dwellings or simpler locations? Each discovery provokes more questions than answers. Environmental context further complicates the picture. Poverty Point was constructed on flood-prone plains, yet the elevated ridges and terraces would have provided refuge from seasonal inundation. Did the builders intentionally integrate these natural rhythms into their design, harmonizing habitation, ritual, and survival? Or was the landscape itself imbued with spiritual or symbolic significance, each ridge and curve representing cosmic or ancestral order. The subtle interaction between the people and the environment hints at a worldview deeply attuned to both earth and sky. The site's chronology is equally compelling. Poverty Point was occupied around 1700 to 1100 BC, a period when agriculture was emerging but not yet dominant in the region. The society that built and used these mounds was largely reliant on riverine resources, fish, mussels, waterfowl, and wild plants. Yet their capacity for monumental construction and coordinated labor challenges conventional assumptions about what hunter-gatherer groups could achieve. How did subsistence, labor organization, and ceremonial ambition intersect to create a site of such enduring impact? Standing atop one of the elevated ridges today, the scale of the complex unfolds in every direction. The curves of the ridges, the open central plaza, and the surrounding floodplain combine to form a vision of community, ritual, and human ingenuity. Yet, for all that has been revealed, much remains hidden. How many more artifacts, patterns, or ceremonial features lie buried beneath centuries of sediment and vegetation? How much do we misunderstand about the social, spiritual, and technological sophistication of the people who constructed these monumental ridges? Poverty Point Ridge Complex reminds us that prehistoric societies were capable of astonishing feats, both physically and socially, long before the development of cities, writing, or metal tools. The site challenges modern assumptions about complexity, coordination, and ritual, and it does so in a language that is subtle yet powerful. Earth, pattern, and labor stretched across the landscape. And still, as we walk the curves and terraces today, questions linger. What ideas, beliefs, or knowledge have been lost? What more does the earth itself hold, waiting for patient eyes and careful hands to uncover? Poverty Point speaks not only of human endeavor, but of human mystery, inviting us to ponder the ingenuity, ambition, and imagination of our prehistoric ancestors. From the sprawling ridges of Poverty Point, shaped over centuries by human hands along the Mississippi floodplains, our journey now carries us across the Pacific to the northern island of Honshu in Japan. Here lies the Sannai-Maruyama Megasettlement, a prehistoric site that redefines our understanding of Neolithic life in East Asia. Spread across nearly 50 hectares, it is one of the largest known settlements of the Jomon period, dating from approximately 3,900 to 2,300 BC. At first glance, the terrain seems unassuming, a series of gentle hills and forested clearings along the coast. But beneath this landscape lies a complex, organized society, meticulously planned and remarkably enduring. Approaching Sannai-Maruyama, one is immediately struck by the scale and structure of the site. Excavations have revealed hundreds of pit dwellings, longhouses, storage pits, and ceremonial spaces, connected by pathways that suggest deliberate planning. Some dwellings are circular, others rectangular, and a few extraordinarily large structures may have served communal purposes, hosting rituals, gatherings, or perhaps seasonal events. How did this community coordinate such a vast and organized settlement without writing, formal governance, or metal tools? And what cultural priorities guided the placement of homes, pathways, and ceremonial spaces within the landscape? Artifacts found at Sannai-Maruyama reveal a society that was both sophisticated and deeply attuned to its environment. Stone tools, pottery fragments, jade ornaments, and figurines abound, many exhibiting intricate craftsmanship. Some pottery is elaborately decorated with cord-marked patterns, suggesting not only functional use but aesthetic and symbolic consideration. The figurines, often anthropomorphic or depicting animals, may have played roles in spiritual or ritual practice. Were these objects tools, talismans, or expressions of communal identity and belief? The precision and care evident in their creation suggest a society deeply invested in both material and symbolic culture. One of the most extraordinary features of Sannai-Maruyama is the evidence of long-term construction and maintenance. Some buildings were rebuilt multiple times on the same site, implying generational continuity, respect for place, and perhaps ritual significance. Storage pits indicate deliberate planning for food security, including nuts, seeds, and fish, reflecting sophisticated ecological knowledge and foresight. This combination of survival strategy and social investment paints a picture of a community that was not only physically resilient but culturally complex, capable of sustaining cohesion over centuries. The settlement also reveals evidence of ceremonial and possibly ritual spaces, distinguished by size, placement, and artifact assemblages. Some larger structures, often positioned near central areas or on elevated terraces, contain clusters of offerings, stone axes, clay figurines, and sometimes remnants of ceremonial fires. Were these communal spaces for spiritual observance, social gathering, or governance? Could they have functioned as early centers for knowledge transmission, storytelling, or ritualized education? And if so, what knowledge, mythologies, or cultural practices were encoded within these spaces, now largely lost to time? The environmental context of Sannai-Maruyama adds further fascination. The settlement was established near freshwater sources and fertile soil, yet it also faced seasonal challenges, cold winters, typhoons, and fluctuating coastal conditions. The inhabitants demonstrated remarkable adaptability, combining semi-sedentary living with fishing, hunting, and gathering. Elevated buildings and longhouses suggest ingenuity in responding to floods, wind, and seasonal cycles. How did this community perceive its relationship to the natural world? Did they view the landscape as a resource, a sacred domain, or both? The interplay of environmental mastery and cultural expression hints at a worldview that is difficult to fully reconstruct. Another intriguing element is the evidence of social and technological networks extending beyond the settlement itself. Jade ornaments and specialized stone tools indicate trade or exchange across considerable distances. How were these networks established, maintained, and regulated? Did they serve purely practical purposes, or did they also convey prestige, spiritual significance, or social alliances? And how did these interactions influence the cultural evolution of Sannai-Maruyama, shaping art, ritual, and daily life in ways that we are only beginning to understand? The organization of the settlement reflects remarkable foresight. Pathways connecting dwellings, longhouses, and ceremonial spaces suggest a shared understanding of space, movement, and social coordination. The longhouses themselves, some exceeding 20 meters in length, required sophisticated carpentry skills, communal labor, and architectural knowledge. How did knowledge of construction, measurement, and coordination pass from one generation to the next? And were these architectural choices driven primarily by practicality, aesthetics, ritual, or a combination of all three? The interplay of labor, knowledge, and symbolic meaning is as tangible in the earth as it is in the artifacts. Sannai-Maruyama also raises questions about population, hierarchy, and social complexity. The scale of the site suggests a community of several thousand people, requiring mechanisms for cooperation, resource management, and social cohesion. Yet the settlement predates large-scale urbanization or written records in the region, challenging assumptions about the evolution of complex societies. How did early Jomon communities organize themselves, resolve disputes, or transmit cultural knowledge across generations? And what factors, environmental, social, or ritual, drove the continuity and eventual decline of the settlement? As one walks among the remains of dwellings, storage pits, and ceremonial areas, there is a palpable sense of human presence across millennia. Each post hole, each carefully shaped artifact, each alignment of structures hints at the rhythm of daily life, of communal effort, and of belief. Yet for all that has been uncovered, Sannai-Maruyama retains its mysteries. Why was the settlement abandoned around 2300 BC? Were climatic shifts, resource pressures, or social transformations responsible, or did ritual and cultural factors play a role in guiding the community's departure? The evidence is tantalizing but incomplete, leaving space for both reflection and wonder. Sannai-Maruyama challenges modern perceptions of prehistoric life. It demonstrates that communities without writing, metallurgy, or urban infrastructure could create enduring, organized, and culturally rich settlements. The site reminds us that human ingenuity, social cohesion, and spiritual expression are not confined to civilizations typically recorded in history books. And still, for all we know, much remains hidden beneath the soil. Post holes unexcavated, artifacts yet undiscovered, traces of ritual and social life that might forever remain elusive. As the wind rustles through the ancient trees and sunlight illuminates the contours of longhouses and pathways, one cannot help but feel a connection to the people of Sannai-Maruyama. They lived, labored, celebrated, and observed the rhythms of the world around them with attention and intention. And yet, the settlement continues to pose profound questions. What ideas, beliefs, and practices remain buried, waiting for patient eyes to uncover them? What aspects of human ingenuity and social organization have been lost to time? Sannai-Maruyama endures as a testament to prehistoric creativity, a sprawling narrative etched into the earth, inviting us to wonder at the complexity, resilience, and imagination of our distant ancestors. From the northern shores of Honshu and the expansive settlements of Sannai-Maruyama, our journey now sweeps across Eurasia to the rolling hills and fertile valleys of what is today Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. Here, in the heart of the Cucuteni Tripilia cultural zone, lie the enigmatic ritual megastructures of the Cucuteni civilization, dating from approximately 4,800 to 3,000 BC. At first glance, these sites may seem ordinary, undulating landscapes punctuated by the remnants of long-abandoned dwellings, clay fragments, and subtle depressions in the earth. But a closer inspection reveals an astonishing intentionality, a scale of planning and ritual sophistication that challenges assumptions about Neolithic life in Europe. Walking across these sites, one immediately senses the rhythm of human labor embedded in the terrain. Unlike the densely packed domestic arrangements typical of other Neolithic settlements, some Cucuteni villages were deliberately designed with vast open spaces and linear arrangements, punctuated by monumental clay and timber structures. Archaeologists have identified patterns suggesting ceremonial axes or central gathering areas, often flanked by clusters of dwellings and what appear to be ritual or symbolic constructions. Could these arrangements reflect cosmological beliefs, community hierarchy, or seasonal ritual observances? And how much of this design was practical, and how much symbolic, intended to convey meaning across generations? The scale of the megastructures themselves is remarkable. Excavations have uncovered foundations and post holes indicating longhouses of extraordinary length, some exceeding 20 meters, with carefully reinforced walls and evidence of repeated reconstruction. In certain settlements, these elongated buildings seem to have served ceremonial purposes, perhaps hosting gatherings, feasts, or religious observances. Stone and clay artifacts, along with the elaborate figurines for which the Cucuteni are famous, have been found in association with these structures. What role did these objects play? Were they offerings, ritual tools, or symbolic markers of social or spiritual identity? The evidence hints at a culture capable of both aesthetic expression and sophisticated communal organization. Perhaps most intriguing are the patterns emerging from aerial surveys and modern mapping of Cucuteni settlements. Some villages appear to have been laid out in concentric circles or spirals, while others exhibit grid-like precision. These patterns suggest not mere functional construction, but careful planning and spatial symbolism. Were these layouts intended to mirror celestial or terrestrial cycles, to guide communal rituals, or to encode cultural knowledge within the very fabric of the settlement? And if so, how was such knowledge transmitted, refined, and preserved over generations in a society without writing? The artifacts associated with these ritual megastructures deepen the mystery. Elaborate figurines, often depicting humans in stylized poses, appear in clusters near central spaces or along pathways. Pottery, intricately decorated with geometric patterns, is frequently found in situ, some intentionally broken and deposited. Scholars suggest these practices may reflect ritualized acts of offering, ancestor veneration, or symbolic marking of space. But the exact meanings remain elusive. How did these ceremonies structure social cohesion? What narratives, myths, or cosmologies were expressed through the careful placement of objects and the shaping of the landscape itself? Environmental context provides further insight. Cucuteni settlements were often located on fertile terraces near rivers, providing rich resources for cultivation, hunting, and gathering. Yet the ceremonial megastructures were frequently positioned on elevated areas or at prominent points within the village, suggesting deliberate choices to emphasize visibility, prominence, or spiritual significance. Was the landscape itself part of the ritual narrative, a living canvas upon which human and divine forces intersected? And if so, what did these structures communicate to participants or observers about their place in the world, the cycles of nature, or the cosmos beyond? Another element of fascination is the sheer temporal span of these sites. Many structures were rebuilt or modified over centuries, creating layers of ritual and habitation intertwined in ways that are difficult to disentangle. This continuity of use implies a sustained cultural practice, a dedication to ceremonial life that endured even as practical daily activities evolved. How did communities maintain such traditions over time? And how much of the symbolic and spiritual meaning of these structures has been lost to the millennia? The Cucuteni ritual megastructures also raise questions about social complexity. Coordinating construction, ritual performance, and the deposition of valuable artifacts would have required leadership, planning, and shared cultural norms. Were these societies egalitarian, or did ceremonial roles and ritual specialists emerge to guide activity and maintain cohesion? And how did the interplay of labor, ritual, and symbolism shape the identity of the community, its perception of the natural world, and its connection to the unseen or spiritual realms? Even today, walking across the remains of a Cucuteni village, one is struck by a sense of rhythm, intentionality, and purpose. Every depression in the earth, every post hole, and every trace of a ceremonial structure hints at generations of human activity, care, and belief. And yet, for all that has been discovered, much remains hidden. Features not yet excavated, patterns not yet fully interpreted, and meanings encoded in clay, earth, and spatial arrangement that continue to elude modern understanding. The Cucuteni ritual megastructures remind us that prehistoric societies were capable of extraordinary sophistication, both materially and symbolically. Through careful construction, repeated use, and intentional placement, they created spaces that communicated identity, belief, and cosmological understanding, all without written language. And still, the landscape retains its mysteries. What other patterns, artifacts, or arrangements remain buried, awaiting discovery? What secrets about ritual practice, social organization, and symbolic life have been lost, hidden within layers of soil and memory? As the wind moves across the terraced hills and sunlight illuminates the outlines of long-abandoned ceremonial spaces, we are left with a quiet, lingering question. What more can the Cucuteni reveal about human ingenuity, spirituality, and social cohesion in a prehistoric world? The megastructures themselves endure, silent yet profound, inviting us to imagine the lives, beliefs, and ambitions of a society whose legacy survives not in written record, but in earth, clay, and the careful rhythms of human labor stretched across generations. From the fertile hills and ritual megastructures of the Cucuteni civilization, our journey now carries us southward to the upper reaches of the Euphrates, to a place where earth and spirit were intertwined over 11,000 years ago. Nevali Cori. Nestled along a now-altered river valley in what is today southeastern Turkey, this small Neolithic settlement offers a profound glimpse into the dawn of communal life, monumental architecture, and ritual practice. At first glance, the site appears modest, a scatter of remnants on a gently sloping terrace. Yet excavations reveal a community whose ambition and symbolic expression far exceed what might be expected for its size. Walking across Nevali Cori, one is immediately struck by the monumental presence of its stone architecture. Long rectangular buildings, some over 10 meters in length, stand as the skeletal remains of communal spaces, their carefully laid stone foundations hinting at repeated occupation and purpose. Within these buildings, archaeologists uncovered carved limestone pillars, many of which bear deeply stylized human and animal motifs. The largest of these pillars, some reaching more than 3 meters in height, suggest both artistic mastery and a symbolic vocabulary that remains only partially understood. Why were these stones erected in this configuration? Were they guardians, representations of deities, or markers of communal memory? And how did a small Neolithic community conceive of and execute such ambitious constructions with simple tools? The carvings themselves are mesmerizing. Some depict abstract human forms, their faces stripped to geometric simplicity, yet imbued with a sense of presence and personality. Others show animals, snakes, birds, and felines, rendered in a manner that evokes both realism and symbolic intent. Were these figures part of ritual practice, talismans intended to protect the community, or manifestations of a cosmology that sought to connect the human and natural worlds? The pillars seem to invite contemplation, as if they were designed to be both functional and communicative, marking space while conveying meaning across generations. Nevali Cori also reveals evidence of communal and possibly ceremonial life that challenges conventional assumptions about Neolithic societies. The layout of buildings suggests organized planning, with pathways and open areas potentially serving as gathering spaces for ritual, labor, or social interaction. Hearths, storage pits, and refuse deposits point to sustained occupation, while certain buildings appear to have been rebuilt repeatedly, indicating both practical and symbolic continuity. How did the inhabitants of Nevali Cori negotiate the balance between domestic life and communal ritual? And what social structures enabled them to coordinate labor for monumental projects, organize ceremonies, and transmit cultural knowledge without writing or formal hierarchy? Artifacts recovered at the site add further intrigue. Stone tools, finely polished and shaped, are interspersed with fragments of carved limestone and occasional exotic materials, hinting at trade networks or long-distance acquisition. Some items appear deliberately placed, suggesting ritual deposition, while others may have been utilitarian. What rules governed the placement of objects, the construction of buildings, or the carving of pillars? Were these practices intended to communicate with spiritual forces, encode knowledge, or reinforce social cohesion within the community? The precise reasoning remains elusive, leaving modern observers to infer intention from material traces. Another remarkable aspect of Nevali Cori is its early chronological position. Dating to approximately 8,400 to 8,100 BC, it predates many other known examples of monumental Neolithic architecture, making it among the earliest sites in the Fertile Crescent to demonstrate a combination of permanent settlement, ritual construction, and symbolic expression. How did knowledge of construction, carving, and communal organization emerge in this early stage of human society? And what factors, environmental, social, or spiritual, motivated communities to invest labor in structures whose purpose extended beyond immediate survival? The environmental context deepens the mystery. Located on a river terrace, the settlement had access to water, fertile soil, and game, yet it also faced seasonal challenges and the dynamics of a floodplain. Elevated stone foundations suggest careful planning to mitigate environmental risk, while the siting of monumental buildings indicates an awareness of spatial hierarchy and prominence. Was the landscape itself part of the symbolic design, with terraces and pathways reflecting cosmological or spiritual principles? And did the community perceive their environment as a partner in ritual and daily life rather than merely a resource to be exploited? Equally compelling is the evidence of long-term ritual practice at Nevali Cori. Certain pillars appear deliberately placed in repeated alignments, suggesting continuity in symbolic thought. Burned deposits, structured refuse, and artifact clusters hint at ceremonial behavior, yet the specific meanings remain opaque. Did these rituals mark seasonal change, life milestones, or interactions with unseen forces? Were the carvings and buildings intended as active participants in ceremony, or as permanent reminders of communal memory? The site's deliberate design invites speculation while resisting definitive explanation. Nevali Cori challenges modern assumptions about early human society. Here, in a small Neolithic settlement, we find evidence of architectural sophistication, artistic expression, ritual practice, and social organization, all emerging over 11,000 years ago, long before written history or urban centers. How did these early communities conceptualize their world, transmit knowledge, and instill a sense of collective identity? And what stories, beliefs, or experiences have been lost to time, leaving only stone and soil as witnesses to lives once lived with care and intention? Standing among the surviving pillars and foundations, one senses both human achievement and enduring enigma. Each carved figure, each carefully placed stone, each layer of occupation speaks of people who observed, planned, and imagined beyond the constraints of survival. And yet, for all that has been uncovered, the site retains profound mystery. How much more remains buried beneath centuries of soil and sediment? What other pillars, carvings, or artifacts lie hidden, awaiting discovery to illuminate further the spiritual and social life of this pioneering Neolithic community? Nevali Cori endures as a silent testament to the creativity, ingenuity, and imagination of early humanity. Its monuments speak not in words but in stone, layout, and symbolic presence, inviting reflection on the complex interplay of daily life, ritual, and cosmic understanding. And as the wind sweeps across the Euphrates terrace and sunlight strikes the carved limestone, we are left with a lingering question. What deeper knowledge, belief, and purpose remains hidden here, waiting for patient eyes to uncover the secrets of a civilization that lived, labored, and imagined so long ago? From the terraced pillars of Nevali Cori, where early Neolithic communities expressed ritual and artistic sophistication along the Euphrates, our journey moves slightly southward to central Anatolia, to the site of Boncuklu Hoyuk. Perched on a gentle mound overlooking the Melendez River Valley, this settlement, dating from around 8,200 to 7,400 BC, offers one of the earliest glimpses of organized domestic life in the region. Yet it is not merely the longevity of habitation that captivates archaeologists and visitors alike. It is the remarkable spatial order, the architectural coherence, and the grid-like organization of the settlement that suggest a society already thinking in terms of geometry, planning, and communal space. Walking across Boncuklu Hoyuk, the first thing one notices is the consistency of its dwellings. Rectangular buildings, carefully aligned along discernible axes, cluster in patterns that hint at intentional planning rather than random settlement. Walls of wattle and daub and stone foundations reveal the hands of people who measured, organized, and coordinated their living spaces with surprising precision for a time before writing, before urbanization, and long before metal tools. How did these early inhabitants conceive of space in such systematic terms? Were these alignments purely practical, designed to maximize sunlight, ventilation, or access? Or did they encode symbolic meaning, reflecting cosmology, social hierarchy, or ritual practice? Excavations of Boncuklu Hoyuk reveal that the architectural grid extended beyond mere domestic dwellings. Central open areas, pathways, and occasionally larger communal buildings indicate shared spaces for social, ritual, or economic activity. Some structures appear to have been rebuilt repeatedly, layer upon layer, suggesting continuity of purpose and a collective memory encoded in stone and clay. Could these communal areas have served as gathering points for seasonal celebrations, exchanges, or rites of passage? And if so, what rules, beliefs, or social agreements governed the organization of space in a manner that endured over centuries? The artifacts recovered at Boncuklu Hoyuk provide further insight into the complexity of daily life and ritual. Stone tools, grinding implements, and obsidian artifacts speak to subsistence strategies, while small clay figurines and traces of early symbolic art hint at spiritual or ritual concerns. Intriguingly, some of these objects are concentrated in specific structures or courtyards, suggesting deliberate deposition. Were these items offerings, ritual markers, or symbols of household or communal identity? And what can their placement tell us about the ways early societies encoded meaning into both objects and spaces? Perhaps most striking is the precision of the settlement's layout. The architectural grid at Boncuklu Hoyuk represents one of the earliest known examples of systematic urban planning, even if the scale was modest. Buildings are positioned with discernible consistency, suggesting a conceptual understanding of axes, orientation, and communal order. Did the inhabitants rely on measurement tools, visual estimation, or oral tradition to maintain this alignment? And was the grid a practical choice for resource distribution, sunlight exposure, or defense, or did it reflect a more abstract vision, an attempt to impose order on the natural landscape, to bring human intention into harmony with environmental and cosmic rhythms? The environmental context of Boncuklu Hoyuk adds another layer to the story. Situated on fertile volcanic soil, with access to riverine resources, the settlement demonstrates careful adaptation to seasonal cycles, climate variability, and resource availability. Elevated building platforms protect dwellings from occasional flooding, while strategic pathways facilitate movement across the site. How did these people perceive and manage the interaction between their built environment and the natural world? Did they see themselves as stewards, participants, or interpreters of the surrounding landscape? And how might these perceptions have influenced the structure and orientation of their grid? Long-term occupation at Boncuklu Hoyuk suggests both stability and adaptability. Evidence indicates continuous habitation for centuries, with dwellings rebuilt, modified, and occasionally relocated within the overall plan of the settlement. This continuity implies not only practical knowledge, but also cultural memory and shared values. How were knowledge, spatial concepts, and communal norms transmitted across generations in the absence of written language? And what can the repeated reconstruction of buildings tell us about evolving social structures, ritual significance, or technological knowledge within the community? Another aspect of fascination is the interplay between private and communal space. Individual households, carefully organized within the grid, coexisted with shared courtyards and pathways, suggesting an early negotiation between personal autonomy and collective responsibility. Were the grids purely functional, or did they serve as a visual or spatial manifestation of social norms, reinforcing cohesion and guiding behavior? And how might the community have balanced the needs of families, laborers, and ritual participants within such a carefully structured environment? The spatial precision of Boncuklu Hoyuk resonates with echoes from other prehistoric sites we have explored, from the ritual megastructures of Cucuteni to the monumental pillars of Nevali Cori. Across continents, millennia, and diverse ecological zones, humans seem compelled to order space, encode meaning, and express identity through construction. What connects these distant societies in their shared impulse to shape their surroundings with intention, precision, and symbolic depth? Is there a universal human drive to organize, to align, to mark communal identity through spatial arrangement? Standing atop the surviving foundations and pathways of Boncuklu Hoyuk, one senses the rhythm of lives long past, families working, children playing, rituals performed, and objects carefully deposited within the grid of their daily existence. The settlement invites reflection not only on practical achievement, but on imagination, foresight, and social cooperation at a time when humanity was still transitioning from mobile hunter-gatherer life to sedentary settlement. Yet, for all we know, much remains hidden. Foundations unexcavated, pathways lost beneath soil, symbolic structures obscured by time. How many details of daily life, social negotiation, and spiritual practice have vanished, leaving only the bare imprint of carefully measured walls and courtyards? Boncuklu Hoyuk endures as a testament to early human ingenuity, a monument to the emergence of order, planning, and cultural expression. Its architectural grid speaks across millennia, not in words but in spatial logic, material investment, and the rhythm of repeated reconstruction. And as sunlight illuminates the foundations, casting shadows across the pathways and terraces, we are left with an enduring question. What more lies buried beneath the mound, awaiting discovery? What other aspects of social, technological, and spiritual life at Boncuklu Hoyuk remain hidden, waiting to reveal the depth and complexity of a society that imagined, measured, and built with purpose more than 10,000 years ago? From the meticulously ordered grid of Boncuklu Hoyuk, where early Anatolian communities demonstrated surprising sophistication in planning, construction, and social organization, our journey now leads just a few kilometers down the fertile Melendez River Valley to Boncuklu Hoyuk. This smaller, yet equally compelling Neolithic settlement, dating from approximately 8,300 to 7,800 BC, offers a fascinating glimpse into the lives of a community living at the dawn of sedentary existence. Though less expansive than its neighbor, Boncuklu Hoyuk reveals subtleties of daily life, early architectural experimentation, and symbolic expression that hint at profound human ingenuity long before the rise of cities or written records. Approaching Boncuklu Hoyuk today, the site presents itself as a modest mound, its contours softened by millennia of erosion. Yet beneath the surface, archaeologists have uncovered a carefully organized village with clusters of semi-subterranean dwellings, communal areas, and storage pits. Unlike the rectilinear precision of Boncuklu Hoyuk, Boncuklu's architecture reflects a more organic arrangement, with rounded and oval structures that seem to have grown from the terrain itself. Could this softer, more fluid spatial organization reflect differences in social structure, ritual practice, or environmental adaptation? And what does it tell us about the diversity of early Neolithic communities in central Anatolia? The dwellings themselves are remarkable. Excavations reveal mud brick and stone foundations, with floors carefully compacted and sometimes coated with lime or clay for durability. Hearths, benches, and storage spaces indicate a deep attention to domestic functionality, yet many structures also contain evidence of symbolic or ritual activity. Clay figurines, often anthropomorphic and rendered with delicate attention to form, are concentrated in specific corners of dwellings, suggesting ritualized placement. Were these figures household guardians, spiritual talismans, or representations of ancestors or deities? And why were they placed with such deliberate care in some structures but absent in others? One of the most intriguing aspects of Boncuklu Hoyuk is the evidence of communal planning within the settlement. While individual dwellings vary in size and shape, pathways and open areas appear to have been maintained for movement and social interaction. Certain pits and depressions suggest areas of gathering or communal labor, perhaps related to food preparation, craft production, or ritual activity. How did the community negotiate the balance between private and communal space, between domestic life and ceremonial practice? And how did such negotiation shape the rhythms of daily life over generations? Artifacts uncovered at Boncuklu Hoyuk deepen the sense of mystery and sophistication. Stone tools, obsidian blades, and grinding stones indicate a society attuned to its environment, capable of manipulating local and distant resources with skill. More enigmatic are the small clay objects and perforated beads, carefully shaped and sometimes arranged in deliberate patterns. Were these personal ornaments, ritual deposits, or symbolic markers of identity and status? And how did such material culture inform or reflect the social and spiritual life of the inhabitants? The settlement's environmental context is equally revealing. Boncuklu Hoyuk occupies a terrace that provided access to fertile soils, fresh water, and abundant wild resources. Yet it also faced seasonal variability and environmental challenges. The semi-subterranean design of the dwellings suggests careful adaptation to temperature fluctuations and perhaps protection from wind or flood. Did the landscape itself guide architectural choices and settlement planning? Were terraces, pathways, and open spaces selected with both practical survival and symbolic intent in mind? The interplay between environment, construction, and ritual hints at a worldview in which human habitation was inseparable from the rhythms and character of the natural world. Another fascinating element is the evidence for continuity and innovation at Boncuklu Hoyuk. Certain structures were rebuilt multiple times, floors resurfaced, and hearths replaced over generations. This suggests not only practical maintenance but also cultural memory, a deliberate effort to preserve spatial and symbolic meaning within the settlement. How was this knowledge transmitted between generations? Through oral tradition, shared labor, or perhaps ritualized practices encoded into the very architecture of the village? And what can these patterns of continuity tell us about early concepts of identity, community, and heritage? Boncuklu Hoyuk also raises intriguing questions about early social complexity. Although the settlement is smaller than Asikli Hoyuk, its organized dwellings, communal spaces, and carefully curated artifacts suggest a level of coordination and social structure not usually associated with early Neolithic villages. Were there designated leaders, ritual specialists, or coordinators responsible for construction, organization, and ceremonial activity? And how did such roles emerge in a society still reliant on hunting, gathering, and early cultivation? The site hints at the early development of social negotiation, division of labor, and collective responsibility, all encoded subtly in the layout and artifacts of the village. The symbolic life of Boncuklu Hoyuk is perhaps its most enduring mystery. The placement of figurines, the construction of certain hearths, and the deliberate deposition of objects suggest ritualized behaviors, yet the precise meanings remain unknown. Did these acts serve to communicate with ancestors, mark seasonal cycles, or encode spiritual or cosmological knowledge? And if so, how did such practices shape the community's perception of the world and their place within it? Each excavation reveals fragments of this puzzle, but the full picture remains tantalizingly out of reach. Standing amidst the foundations and hearths of Boncuklu Hoyuk today, one senses both intimacy and complexity. These are spaces where families lived, labored, celebrated, and engaged with the unseen, guided by shared knowledge, practice, and belief. Yet for all that has been uncovered, many questions remain. How many structures, figurines, or symbolic features lie undiscovered beneath centuries of soil? What aspects of domestic life, ritual, and social negotiation remain invisible to modern eyes, leaving only traces for archaeologists to interpret? Boncuklu Hoyuk endures as a quiet testament to the ingenuity, adaptability, and imagination of early Neolithic communities. Its dwellings, artifacts, and subtle organizational patterns speak not in grand monuments, but in careful planning, symbolic practice, and enduring continuity. And as sunlight illuminates the compact terraces and the gentle slope of the mound, one cannot help but wonder, what deeper knowledge, beliefs, and social structures remain hidden here, waiting for patient investigation to reveal the lives and aspirations of a society that lived, labored, and imagined over 10,000 years ago? From the terraced homes and symbolic architecture of Boncuklu Hoyuk, our journey moves eastward, climbing into the rugged landscapes of the Zagros Mountains, where the Euphrates and its tributaries carve deep valleys through limestone cliffs. Here, hidden in a secluded side valley, lies Zawi Chemi Shanidar, a small Neolithic settlement whose quiet presence belies its significance. Dating to approximately 10,500 to 9,500 BC, it predates many of the monumental sites we have explored, yet it offers profound insight into the dawn of sedentary life, social organization, and ritual practice among early human communities. The site occupies a narrow terrace overlooking the valley, where the sun slants across rocky outcrops and the stream below glimmers with a delicate light. At first glance, Zawi Chemi Shanidar seems almost unremarkable. Scattered stones, subtle depressions, and faint traces of former structures. Yet careful excavation reveals a settlement laid out with deliberate thought. Semi-subterranean dwellings nestle into the earth, their walls reinforced with stone, their compact floors suggesting both functionality and comfort. Pathways and open spaces link these dwellings, hinting at communal coordination and a shared sense of spatial order. How did such early communities conceive of their environment, balancing practicality with social and perhaps symbolic priorities? The dwellings themselves are fascinating in their simplicity and sophistication. Each semi-subterranean pit is designed to buffer against the harsh mountain climate, providing cool refuge in summer and protection from the cold winds of winter. Hearths, storage pits, and raised platforms indicate domestic care and attention, yet many of these spaces reveal subtle signs of ritual. Stone and clay objects, carefully placed within specific corners or pits, suggest symbolic acts, perhaps offerings, perhaps markers of social or spiritual significance. What thoughts, beliefs, or traditions guided these choices? Were these objects meant to communicate with ancestors, spirits, or unseen forces in the natural world? Artifacts recovered at Zawi Chemi Shanidar deepen the sense of mystery. Flint blades and ground stone tools indicate sophisticated craftsmanship, while beads, small figurines, and other symbolic objects suggest ritualized behaviors embedded into everyday life. Some objects appear deliberately broken or deposited in particular locations, hinting at practices that went beyond the utilitarian. Were these ceremonial deposits intended to mark important events, such as births, deaths, or seasonal changes? Or were they meant to encode knowledge, values, or beliefs for future generations, preserving a spiritual or social memory in the very fabric of the settlement? Perhaps most remarkable is the evidence of communal and social organization. Certain open areas may have served as gathering spaces for work, ritual, or social interaction. Hearths and storage pits situated in these areas suggest collective activity, indicating that coordination and cooperation were essential to the community's survival and cohesion. How were responsibilities divided? Did certain individuals emerge as ritual leaders or coordinators of communal labor? And how did such social roles evolve naturally in a small, early Neolithic society, relying primarily on hunting, gathering, and early cultivation. The surrounding landscape adds another layer of significance. Zawi Chemi Shanidar's terrace is framed by steep slopes and rocky ridges, offering natural protection while also demanding careful adaptation. The nearby river valley provided fresh water, fertile soils, and abundant wildlife. Yet the community also had to navigate seasonal challenges, from flooding to harsh winters. Did the inhabitants perceive their environment merely as a resource to be managed, or as a landscape imbued with spiritual meaning? And how might these perceptions have influenced the siting of dwellings, pathways, and the placement of symbolic objects? Evidence suggests continuity and intentionality over generations. Some structures were rebuilt multiple times, floors resurfaced, and hearths maintained with care. Such repetition implies not only practical maintenance, but also the preservation of memory, ritual practice, and social knowledge. How is this knowledge transmitted? Through teaching, observation, or ritualized repetition? And what does the layering of human activity reveal about the evolving relationship between the community, their environment, and their spiritual understanding? Zawi Chemi Shanidar also hints at early ritual sophistication. Certain pits contain carefully arranged deposits of objects, sometimes broken or otherwise altered. These deliberate acts of deposition suggest ritual or symbolic intent, yet their precise meaning remains unknown. Were they intended to honor ancestors, to mark seasonal or life cycle events, or to ensure harmony with unseen forces in the natural world? The material record provides clues, but the full significance is lost to time, leaving modern observers to interpret subtle traces of intention and belief. Standing amid the terraces, hearths, and foundation remnants of Zawi Chemi Shanidar, one senses a profound intimacy. These are the spaces of early human life, families gathered, tools fashioned, fires maintained, and rituals enacted quietly alongside survival. Yet, for all that has been uncovered, the site holds lingering mysteries. How many structures, objects, or symbolic arrangements remain hidden beneath millennia of sediment? What aspects of social, spiritual, or domestic life have been erased by time, leaving only hints in stone, clay, and soil? Zawi Chemi Shanidar reminds us that even small, seemingly humble settlements can hold extraordinary significance. Its semi-subterranean dwellings, carefully maintained hearths, and ritualized deposits reveal early human ingenuity, social cohesion, and symbolic thought at the very threshold of permanent settlement. And as sunlight cuts across the rocky terrace, illuminating the subtle contours of long abandoned floors and pits, we are left with a quiet, lingering question. What deeper knowledge, belief, and intention remain hidden here, waiting for careful observation and excavation to reveal the lives of those who inhabited this valley more than 11,000 years ago? From the commanding hilltop of La Bastida, with its monumental Cyclopean walls and carefully planned streets, we now turn our gaze northward to the fertile landscapes of southwestern Germany, to a site that, though smaller in scale, reveals astonishing insights into early Neolithic social organization and ritual life. The Talheim Circular Enclosure. Situated near the modern village of Talheim in the Neckar Valley, this circular earthwork dates to around 5000 BC, placing it squarely in the early linear pottery culture. At first glance, it might seem modest compared to the monumental fortifications of La Bastida, yet its form, construction, and context suggest a deliberate, purposeful design that hints at social cohesion, ritualized practice, and perhaps even early concepts of territorial identity. Approaching Talheim today, the remains of the enclosure are subtle. Low rises in the soil mark the perimeter of what was once a circular ditch, punctuated by openings whose original purpose remains a matter of careful speculation. Archaeologists have reconstructed portions of the site, revealing a near-perfect circle measuring roughly 135 meters in diameter. The geometry of the structure is striking. Its symmetry and regularity suggest that those who built it possessed not only practical skill, but an aesthetic and perhaps symbolic sensibility. How did people of this era achieve such geometric precision without written measurements or formalized mathematics? Was this regularity functional, ceremonial, or a mixture of both? Within the enclosure, evidence indicates that the space was not used for ordinary domestic life. No long-term dwellings have been found inside the circular boundary, suggesting that Talheim functioned as a specialized area, possibly for gatherings, rituals, or communal ceremonies. Here, earth, timber, and perhaps even ephemeral structures may have been used to mark stages of life, seasonal cycles, or spiritual observances. Could this circular form have represented cosmological concepts, a symbolic microcosm of the natural world, or a boundary between the mundane and the sacred? And how did the community relate to this carefully defined space on a social and spiritual level? Artifacts recovered from within and around the Talheim enclosure deepen the intrigue. Pottery fragments, polished stone tools, and small figurines indicate a complex interplay between practical subsistence and ritual expression. Some objects appear deliberately deposited, while others seem to have been left in structured arrangements. Were these placements offerings to ancestors, markers of social status, or components of rites designed to harmonize the community with natural or supernatural forces? And what do these material traces reveal about the values, beliefs, and organization of a people whose lives unfolded entirely without written records? The circular design itself raises compelling questions about Neolithic concepts of space and social cohesion. Unlike the rectilinear dwellings of settlements such as Asikli Hoyuk or Boncuklu Hoyuk, the enclosure's geometry seems to prioritize the collective over the individual. Could the circular arrangement have been intended to foster equality, with no house or structure claiming central dominance? Or was it aligned to celestial events, seasonal changes, or the movements of the sun and stars? Some researchers have suggested that the openings in the ditch might have been oriented toward cardinal directions or specific landscape features, hinting at an early awareness of astronomy and topography in ritual planning. But without definitive records, the full significance remains a puzzle. Evidence from similar linear pottery sites suggests that circular enclosures like Talheim were part of broader social networks. The enclosure could have functioned as a communal gathering point, where multiple settlements or family groups assembled for feasting, negotiation, or ritualized activities. How did communities coordinate such gatherings, and what rules governed participation, ritual performance, or resource sharing? And how might these interactions have reinforced social cohesion, hierarchy, or collective memory across generations? Talheim also challenges our understanding of early Neolithic life because of its connection to the nearby Talheim Death Pit, discovered in the 1980s, which contained mass burial remains of at least 34 individuals. These remains bear evidence of violent trauma, raising questions about conflict, social stress, or intergroup tensions in the early Neolithic period. Could the circular enclosure have served a protective function, a ceremonial space designed to manage social or territorial boundaries, or even a stage for conflict resolution and negotiation? And how does the coexistence of ritualized communal architecture with evidence of violence reshape our understanding of these early farming communities? The construction of the enclosure itself demonstrates technical knowledge and communal labor. The ditch was dug systematically, with earth likely removed in successive layers, and the excavated material perhaps arranged to form internal banks or terraces. Timber palisades may have once crowned the outer edge, though evidence has largely vanished. This effort implies careful planning, coordination, and perhaps leadership within the community. How were tasks allocated among members? Was labor motivated by spiritual belief, social obligation, or both? And how might the collective effort of building such an enclosure have reinforced social bonds or conveyed authority? Environmental context adds another layer of complexity. Talheim sits within a fertile valley, offering access to rivers, arable land, and forests rich in game and resources. The positioning of the circular enclosure within this landscape suggests deliberate selection for visibility, defensibility, or symbolic prominence. Was the site meant to communicate social or spiritual presence to neighboring groups, marking territory or asserting communal identity? And how did the interaction between environmental opportunity and social intention shape the design, placement, and use of the enclosure? The subtlety of Talheim today contrasts sharply with the intensity of human effort invested in its creation. Unlike monumental stone fortifications or extensive settlements, the enclosure's remains demand careful observation and interpretation. The circular form, the carefully dug ditch, and the faint traces of internal features all speak to a culture capable of abstract thought, symbolic expression, and collective organization at a surprisingly early stage in human history. How did people conceive of such abstract communal spaces, and what rituals, beliefs, or social negotiations took place within them over centuries of repeated use? Standing amid the low mounds of Talheim, one is struck by the sense of intentionality that pervades the site. These were spaces shaped by human hands, guided by perception, imagination, and social purpose. They were places where people gathered, performed, and perhaps reconciled the tensions of everyday survival with the demands of collective life. And yet, for all that has been discovered, much remains hidden. How many structures, deposits, or traces of activity remain buried beneath centuries of soil, invisible to the modern eye? What aspects of ritual, negotiation, or social life have been lost to time, leaving only the faintest echoes for archaeologists to interpret? Talheim's circular enclosure reminds us that even the most modest prehistoric constructions can carry profound meaning. Its carefully shaped ditch, precise circular form, and strategic placement within the landscape speak to an early human desire to impose order, structure, and significance onto the world. And as sunlight filters across the shallow banks and long abandoned pathways, we are left with a quiet, lingering question. What deeper knowledge, social insight, or spiritual understanding remains concealed here, hidden in the earth, awaiting discovery by those patient enough to listen to the subtle testimony of a people who shaped this landscape more than 7,000 years ago? From the quiet, ritualized circular enclosures of Talheim, where early communities carved order and meaning from the earth, our journey now carries us southward across the rugged landscapes of southeastern Spain. Perched atop a rocky hill in the Murcia region, the settlement of La Bastida rises as a silent testament to human ambition, ingenuity, and the enduring desire to shape the world according to collective vision. It is the sheer scale of its Cyclopean walls that first arrests the imagination. Massive stones, hewn and fitted together with remarkable precision, forming fortifications whose presence dominates the landscape and speaks to a society capable of unprecedented coordination and labor organization. Approaching La Bastida today, the site's grandeur is impossible to miss. The walls rise from the hilltop in angular, commanding lines, some blocks weighing several tons. Even partially eroded, their scale evokes awe. The term Cyclopean conjures myths of giants, yet the reality lies in the coordinated effort of human hands. Who were these builders, and how did they conceive of moving, shaping, and assembling such immense stones without modern tools? Were the walls purely defensive, or did they also serve as symbols of communal identity, authority, and control? The settlement within these fortifications reveals remarkable sophistication. Excavations uncover a dense network of stone and mud brick dwellings, arranged along streets that suggest careful planning and social stratification. Houses vary in size and complexity, some containing multiple rooms, raised platforms, and evidence of storage. Hearths, grinding stones, and tools hint at daily life, yet their arrangement within the fortified perimeter also suggests oversight, coordination, and perhaps even social hierarchy. How did these early communities balance domestic necessity with the monumental effort required to construct the walls? And what social structures allowed such collaboration to occur? Artifacts from La Bastida deepen the sense of intrigue. Pottery, metal tools, and remains of food storage indicate a community both technologically capable and deeply invested in sustaining its population. Yet, some objects suggest more than mere survival. They hint at ritual, symbolic expression, and intentionality. Small figurines, deliberately placed stones, and structured deposits hint at practices that may have been spiritual or social in nature. Were these objects offerings to deities, markers of status, or tools for communicating shared cultural narratives? And what can these traces tell us about the beliefs and values of a people who left no written records? The Cyclopean walls themselves are a puzzle of ingenuity. Irregular yet precisely fitted blocks create a barrier both formidable and deliberate. Entrances and gateways punctuate the perimeter, carefully aligned for visibility and control. Some researchers suggest these features were designed to regulate movement, monitor access, or even impose psychological pressure on outsiders. Could these fortifications have been intended to protect against rival communities, raiding parties, or unpredictable natural events? Or were they also a stage upon which social power and communal identity were performed, reinforcing cohesion and hierarchy from the first stone to the last? Beyond the walls, the surrounding landscape plays a critical role. La Bastida commands sweeping views of the fertile valleys below, river plains that would have supported agriculture, and distant mountains that mark natural boundaries. The hilltop location offered both strategic advantage and symbolic prominence. Was the choice of this site purely practical, or did it carry spiritual or cosmological significance? And how did the interplay between natural terrain and human design influence the community's sense of place, security, and identity? Construction techniques at La Bastida reveal a level of knowledge and skill that continues to fascinate archaeologists. The massive stones were shaped, transported, and assembled with precision, relying on weight, leverage, and cooperative effort rather than mortar. What techniques and tools were employed? How was expertise transmitted across generations? And what does this level of technical achievement tell us about early Bronze Age society in this region, in terms of both labor organization and collective vision? Evidence suggests that La Bastida was more than a defensive outpost. The spatial arrangement of houses, communal spaces, and the fortifications themselves implies a society that understood hierarchy, cooperation, and perhaps ritualized activity. Public spaces and wide streets indicate communal engagement, while variations in dwelling size hint at differential status or function. How did leadership, social negotiation, and cooperation manifest in the daily lives of its inhabitants? And how might rituals, both public and private, have reinforced social bonds within these imposing walls? Artifacts hint at the complex symbolic life of La Bastida's residents. Pottery styles, figurines, and structured deposits suggest intentionality and meaning beyond practicality. Were these objects part of daily religious or spiritual practice? Were they used to mark rites of passage, commemorate ancestors, or establish social cohesion? And how did such symbolic behaviors interact with the architecture itself, turning the settlement into a living canvas of belief, authority, and communal identity? Standing amid the remnants of La Bastida today, one is struck by the dialogue between human ambition and the rugged landscape. The walls, massive and silent, communicate both protection and authority, a testament to the labor, imagination, and coordination of a society that thrived over 4,000 years ago. And yet, despite centuries of study, much remains unresolved. How were daily life, ritual, and social hierarchy enacted under the shadow of these fortifications? What secrets lie buried beneath floors, streets, and walls, waiting to reveal the intimate details of a society whose presence continues to echo across time? La Bastida challenges modern assumptions about prehistoric fortifications. Its Cyclopean walls are more than defensive structures. They are expressions of human ingenuity, social coordination, and cultural vision. As sunlight casts long shadows across the stone ramparts, one is left with a quiet, lingering question. What deeper knowledge, social organization, and spiritual understanding remain hidden within this monumental landscape, awaiting discovery by those patient enough to listen to the echoes of a people who shaped stone, society, and the world around them with remarkable foresight? From the monumental Cyclopean walls of La Bastida, where human ingenuity sculpted stone and society into a visible testament of ambition and organization, our journey now sweeps eastward across the seas and islands of Southeast Asia to the highlands of Western Java in Indonesia. Here, amidst mist-shrouded hills and dense tropical vegetation, rise the enigmatic Gunung Padang Terraces, an archaeological site that challenges conventional timelines and invites us to reconsider the very nature of prehistoric engineering, ritual, and human ambition. Unlike the linear streets of La Bastida or the circular enclosures of Talheim, Gunung Padang presents a multi-tiered labyrinth of megalithic stone terraces, ascending a hill in a carefully ordered, almost architectural spiral, each level a step into both human ingenuity and the mysteries of time itself. Approaching Gunung Padang, the first impression is immediately cinematic. Massive stone blocks, irregular yet deliberately shaped, emerge from dense vegetation, forming terraces that climb the gentle slope of the hill like an immense staircase to the clouds. Mist drifts across the stones in the early morning, blurring the lines between natural formation and human creation, lending the site an almost otherworldly aura. The stones themselves are volcanic, sourced from nearby outcrops, and they range from carefully worked blocks to enormous, unshaped boulders. How were these massive stones quarried, transported, and positioned atop the hill in a culture that predates known large-scale construction techniques? And why was this particular hill chosen, amidst so many others in the region, to become the stage for such an extraordinary endeavor? Archaeological investigation reveals a site that is far more complex than it first appears. Gunung Padang is not a single platform or terrace, but a multi-layered network of terraces and retaining walls, constructed in a deliberate sequence, suggesting an evolving project undertaken over generations. Each level contains carefully placed stones, arranged to create flat surfaces that may have supported structures, ritual spaces, or communal activity. Some terraces incorporate polygonal stonework, reminiscent of Inca masonry, while others retain rougher, massive boulders, suggesting that precision and labor were balanced with availability and practical considerations. Was this an architectural experiment evolving over centuries, refined by trial, observation, and cultural knowledge? And what motivated such sustained labor in a location so challenging and remote? Dating the site has proven complex and tantalizing. Conventional archaeological studies place the primary construction of the terraces around 2500 BC, situating it firmly within the late Neolithic or early Bronze Age of the region. Yet deeper analysis of soil strata and radiocarbon samples suggests the possibility of much older layers, potentially reaching back as far as 5000 BC or even earlier. If these older layers reflect human activity, Gunung Padang may predate many of the other monumental constructions we have explored in this video by millennia. Could it be that an advanced understanding of megalithic construction emerged here independently, Or was there a broader network of prehistoric knowledge we are only beginning to glimpse? The purpose of the terraces continues to intrigue researchers. Excavations reveal stone alignments, platforms, and voids that may have served ritual or ceremonial purposes, yet no clear evidence of habitation has been found at the upper levels. Were these terraces intended for gatherings, spiritual observance, or astronomical alignment? Some studies suggest that the terraces align with specific celestial events, such as solstices, equinoxes, or particular star positions. Did the builders conceive of their environment in a cosmological context, using stone to mark both sacred space and the passage of time? Or were these alignments coincidental, a serendipitous consequence of the hill's natural topography? Gunung Padang also raises fascinating questions about social organization and labor. The transportation, placement, and alignment of massive stone blocks would have required coordinated effort, planning, and possibly hierarchical oversight. How did a prehistoric community organize hundreds, if not thousands, of workers for a project that spanned decades or centuries? Were specialized labor groups responsible for quarrying, transport, and placement? And how was knowledge of construction techniques preserved and transmitted across generations in a society without written records? Each terrace, each carefully interlocked stone, is a testament not only to practical skill, but to social cohesion and collective vision. The site's geological context adds yet another layer of mystery. Beneath the visible terraces lie layers of volcanic rock, some of which exhibit evidence of modification or cutting. While some scholars argue these are natural formations, others suggest they may represent deliberately altered substrates, forming the foundation for subsequent terraces. Could the builders have selected, modified, or engineered the hill itself to serve as a stable platform for their monumental construction? And if so, does this suggest a level of engineering foresight far beyond what we typically associate with Neolithic communities? Artifacts recovered from the surrounding area provide tantalizing glimpses of human activity, but few definitive answers. Pottery shards, stone tools, and ceremonial objects suggest a culture deeply invested in both practical subsistence and symbolic life. Yet, the absence of habitation structures atop the terraces implies that these were not domestic spaces. Were they intended exclusively for ritual gatherings, initiation ceremonies, or elite social activity? And what can the material record, fragmented and scattered, tell us about the beliefs, social structures, or cosmological understanding of the people who created this imposing monument? Some interpretations verge into the speculative, yet they underscore the enduring mystery of Gunung Padang. Certain researchers suggest the terraces may represent a form of proto-urban planning, or an early example of monumental architecture on a scale previously unrecognized in Southeast Asia. Could there have been knowledge of structural engineering, hydrology, or even early astronomy that guided construction? And if so, how widespread was this knowledge, and what cultural networks might have connected these early architects to other regions across Asia and beyond? The terraces themselves invite contemplation. From the base, the site appears as a natural hill with scattered stones. Yet as one ascends, the intricate arrangement becomes apparent, each level revealing a deliberate design and the human hand behind the seemingly chaotic boulders. Walking these terraces today, one senses both the monumental effort required to create them and the intimate gestures embedded in each stone placement. How did those who labored here perceive the space? Was it sacred, functional, or both? Did they climb these terraces with a sense of purpose, ritual, or awe, tracing the same steps that countless generations had traced before them? Even the surrounding landscape seems to play a role in the site's significance. Gunung Padang commands views of the surrounding valleys, rivers, and distant mountains, integrating natural topography into its design. The location offers both visibility and isolation, a platform for ceremony, observation, or perhaps even territorial claim. Did the builders intend the terraces to communicate social, spiritual, or political presence to distant observers? And what does this reveal about the conceptual world of the people who shaped these stones, negotiated these slopes, and inscribed meaning into the landscape? Standing atop Gunung Padang today, one cannot help but feel a profound connection to the past. The terraces, mist-laden stones, and ascending platforms evoke both human ambition and mystery, a silent testimony to collective effort, ritual, and perhaps knowledge lost to time. For all the scientific study, excavation, and analysis, many questions remain unresolved. How many terraces, stones, or features lie hidden beneath vegetation and soil? What practices, ceremonies, or knowledge-guided construction, and how much of it has vanished without trace? The site challenges conventional timelines, architectural assumptions, and our understanding of prehistoric society itself, leaving modern observers to confront the limits of knowledge and the enduring power of mystery. Gunung Padang reminds us that human history is far richer, older, and more complex than we often imagine. Its terraces are more than stone. They are the embodiment of intention, labor, and vision across generations. And as the mist rolls through the volcanic stones, we are left with a quiet, lingering question: what deeper knowledge, social organization, and spiritual insight remain? From the mist-laden terraces of Gunung Padang, where stone ascends the hills like a deliberate staircase to the clouds, our exploration now carries us northeast across the Asian continent to the Loess plateaus of the upper Yellow River Valley, in what is today Gansu Province, China. Here lies the Dadiwan architectural complex, an enigmatic site whose layered structures reveal not only the ingenuity of early Neolithic communities, but also hint at sophisticated social organization, ritual practice, and the shaping of communal identity far earlier than previously recognized. Unlike the monumental terraces of Gunung Padang or the Cyclopean walls of La Bastida, Dadiwan presents a subtler yet equally profound form of architectural expression. A series of earthen foundations, post holes, and stone alignments that suggest careful planning, repeated construction, and the imposition of human order upon the landscape. Approaching Dadiwan, the first impression is one of quiet subtlety. The site is largely defined by depressions in the earth and faint linear traces, some partially reconstructed by archaeologists, that indicate the outlines of longhouses, platforms, and possible communal enclosures. At first glance, the remnants may seem unremarkable, yet their regularity and spatial organization reveal deliberate planning. Rectilinear foundations, aligned along consistent axes, suggest not only architectural intent, but also social intent. These were spaces meant to organize human activity, mark social roles, and perhaps establish ritual boundaries. How did these early builders conceive such ordered layouts? And what principles guided their placement of structures in relation to one another? Excavations at Dadiwan reveal a settlement active between approximately 5,800 BC and 5,000 BC, placing it firmly within the early Yangshao culture. The complexity of the site challenges traditional assumptions about Neolithic life in this region. Longhouses, built with timber posts anchored into carefully dug post holes, were arranged in rows, often surrounding central open spaces. These open areas may have served communal, ceremonial, or administrative purposes. Was Dadiwan a purely domestic settlement, or did it also function as a ceremonial center where rituals, feasts, and social negotiations took place? And how did the spatial arrangement of buildings reinforce social hierarchy, community cohesion, or cultural identity? Artifacts recovered from Dadiwan provide both clarity and mystery. Polished stone tools, finely crafted pottery, and jade ornaments indicate technical skill, aesthetic sensibility, and trade networks extending beyond the immediate region. Yet some finds suggest symbolic or ritual behavior. Deliberately placed stones, structured pits, and human burials carefully integrated within the settlement hint at practices that blend the practical with the spiritual. How did the inhabitants understand the relationship between their living spaces, communal structures, and the unseen forces they may have sought to honor or control? Were these rituals primarily protective, commemorative, or cosmological in nature? The construction of Dadiwan's longhouses and platforms also demonstrates remarkable technical knowledge. Timber posts, some exceptionally large, were inserted into post holes and bound with perishable materials, forming robust frameworks that supported walls and roofs. Floors were often compacted and leveled, suggesting concern for durability and comfort. How was this knowledge transmitted across generations? And what does the integration of construction techniques, spatial organization, and symbolic placement tell us about the interplay between human labor, social cohesion, and cultural expression in a community over 7,500 years ago? Beyond the immediate structures, Dadiwan's landscape context is significant. Situated on fertile Loess plains near tributaries of the Yellow River, the settlement had access to rich agricultural land, abundant water, and nearby forests for timber and fuel. Yet the choice of specific building sites within this landscape was not arbitrary. Elevation, drainage, and visibility appear to have influenced placement, suggesting early environmental awareness and strategic planning. Did these choices also carry symbolic weight, connecting dwellings, communal spaces, and ritual areas to cosmological or spiritual concepts? And how might such considerations have guided the social, economic, and spiritual life of the settlement? Human burials at Dadiwan further enrich the narrative. Excavations have revealed interments placed with care, often associated with grave goods, including pottery, stone tools, and ornaments. The orientation, grouping, and content of these burials hint at emerging social differentiation, ritual behavior, or ancestor veneration. What criteria determined who was buried where, with what objects, and in what manner? Were these practices intended to honor lineage, assert social status, or maintain cosmic harmony? And how did the dead continue to shape the life of the living within the spatial and social structure of the settlement? The evidence of repeated construction and renovation adds another layer of intrigue. Floors were rebuilt, posts replaced, and terraces leveled over decades, suggesting long-term occupation and the sustained transmission of architectural knowledge. What prompted these continual modifications? Were they responses to environmental change, social evolution, or shifts in ritual and cosmological understanding? And how did such deliberate repetition reinforce community identity, collective memory, and cultural continuity? Dadiwan also invites consideration of early communication and social networks. Materials such as jade, which may have originated from distant regions, indicate trade or exchange connections that extended well beyond the immediate settlement. How were such interactions organized? Did shared ritual practices, architectural styles, or technological knowledge circulate across communities in ways that connected distant populations? And how might Dadiwan have functioned as a hub of both material and cultural transmission in the broader Neolithic landscape of northern China? Walking among the reconstructed post holes and terraces today, the imagination is drawn to the lives of those who occupied Dadiwan. Families gathering around hearths, artisans shaping tools, and community leaders coordinating construction and ritual. The settlement evokes both the ordinary and the extraordinary, the practical and the symbolic. How did the inhabitants perceive their world? Did they see themselves as shaping it through labor, ritual, and architecture, or as participants in forces far larger than themselves, expressed in the careful alignment of posts, the layering of earth, and the organization of communal space. Even with extensive archaeological study, Dadiwan retains an aura of mystery. The site's long occupation, complex architecture, and integration of ritual and domestic space suggest a sophisticated understanding of social, environmental, and spiritual organization. Yet many questions remain. What symbolic or spiritual frameworks guided the placement of buildings, posts, and communal spaces? How were knowledge, skill, and ritual authority transmitted within this community? And what connections, cultural or technological, might have linked Dadiwan to other contemporaneous Neolithic sites across China and beyond? The architectural and social innovations of Dadiwan remind us that early human communities were not only surviving, they were imagining, organizing, and creating in ways that resonate across millennia. Each post hole, each leveled terrace, each carefully deposited artifact tells a story of ambition, planning, and the human desire to impose order and meaning upon the world. And as the wind stirs the grasses over the Loess Plateau, one is left with a lingering question. What deeper knowledge, social structures, and spiritual understanding remain hidden beneath the soil, waiting for those patient enough to uncover the enduring story of Dadiwan and the people who shaped it, generation by generation, millennia ago? From the Loess-covered terraces of Dadiwan, where early communities demonstrated extraordinary sophistication in architecture, social organization, and ritual practice, our journey now carries us to the remote landscapes of the South Pacific, to the verdant hills of what is today the Polynesian archipelago. Here lies the enigmatic Tainiaro Megastructure, a site that challenges conventional notions of prehistoric human engineering, ceremonial construction, and the very scale of early human ambition. Unlike Dadiwan's carefully arranged timber post houses or Gunung Padang's volcanic terraces, Tainiaro rises with a sense of deliberate monumentality. Massive stone platforms, linear alignments, and stepped terraces carved into volcanic ridges that span hundreds of meters, forming a labyrinthine complex whose purpose and construction continue to puzzle scholars. Approaching Tainiaro, the first impression is one of awe. Thick, mist-laden vegetation partially obscures the massive stones, each weighing multiple tons, arranged with remarkable precision into terraces and linear foundations. Some blocks are roughly hewn yet carefully interlocked. Others exhibit smooth faces, suggesting advanced techniques for shaping and placement. As one ascends the lower terraces, the scale becomes apparent. The site is not a single platform, but a series of interconnected levels that climb the ridgeline, forming a complex that dominates the surrounding valleys. How did prehistoric communities transport and position these stones in such a challenging topography? And what motivated such monumental effort in a landscape that, though fertile, demanded extraordinary labor to reshape so dramatically? Archaeological investigation has revealed that the site dates to approximately 1200 BC, though some evidence hints at earlier phases of construction, possibly extending to 1500 BC or even earlier. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal deposits, soil strata, and associated artifacts suggests multiple phases of construction, indicating that Tainiaro was not a one-time project but a long-term endeavor spanning generations. Each terrace appears to have been carefully leveled, with retaining walls built to stabilize the earth and create flat platforms. Was this multi-generational approach purely practical, or did it carry ceremonial or symbolic significance? Could these terraces have been designed to honor ancestors, mark astronomical events, or codify social hierarchy in stone? The architecture of Tainiaro is as complex as it is imposing. Linear alignments of stones suggest processional pathways, while large central platforms hint at communal gathering spaces or ritual arenas. Some terraces contain carved depressions that may have served as post holes, water basins, or markers of symbolic significance. The precision of the layout, with terraces aligned along ridgelines and oriented to the surrounding landscape, suggests a deep understanding of topography and possibly celestial events. Were these alignments intended to track solstices, equinoxes, or other astronomical cycles, connecting the human and natural worlds in a shared cosmological framework? Or were they designed to create visual impact, impressing on both participants and distant observers the power and cohesion of the community that built them? The scale of labor required to construct Tainiaro is staggering. Thousands of tons of stone were quarried, transported, and arranged across difficult terrain without the benefit of modern tools or draft animals. This implies not only technical skill, but also an extraordinary degree of social organization. How were labor, materials, and knowledge coordinated? Was there a centralized leadership directing the project, or did cooperative networks of families and clans manage construction collectively? And what motivated communities to commit decades, perhaps centuries, to a project whose purpose may have been symbolic, ceremonial, or spiritual, rather than purely practical? Artifacts recovered from and around Tainiaro provide tantalizing clues but no definitive answers. Pottery fragments, stone tools, and carved figures suggest that the site was a hub of activity, yet no evidence of permanent domestic occupation has been found atop the terraces. Were these platforms used primarily for ritual gatherings, initiations, or political assemblies? Some researchers propose that Tainiaro may have functioned as a ceremonial center for a wide regional network of communities, where trade, diplomacy, and social negotiation occurred alongside ritual practice. How did these activities shape the social landscape, and what rules or customs governed participation in such gatherings? The monumental terraces themselves raise further questions about the worldview of Tainiaro's builders. Unlike domestic architecture, the scale and prominence of these constructions suggest deliberate visibility, both within the community and across the valleys beyond. Did the builders intend these terraces as markers of territorial claim, spiritual presence, or communal identity? How did participants perceive these structures, as sacred, awe-inspiring spaces that linked human action to cosmic order, or as symbols of social hierarchy, labor, and control? And how did successive generations maintain, modify, and reinterpret these structures over time? Tainiaro also challenges conventional ideas about technological capability in the prehistoric Pacific. The techniques used to quarry, shape, and move massive stone blocks remain poorly understood. Some stones appear precisely fitted without mortar, while others are arranged in polygonal formations reminiscent of megalithic traditions across the globe. Could this suggest shared knowledge or convergent innovation among distant prehistoric societies? And if so, what networks of observation, travel, or cultural exchange might have facilitated the transfer of such knowledge? The ceremonial dimension of Tainiaro is particularly compelling. Certain terraces feature alignments of stones that appear deliberately placed, perhaps to demarcate sacred zones, processional paths, or ritual boundaries. Other terraces contain small depressions or pits, which some researchers interpret as sites for offerings, water collection, or symbolic interaction with the earth. Were these features intended to honor deities, mark ancestral presence, or manage communal resources in ways that blended spiritual and practical considerations? And how did ritual, labor, and social cohesion intersect in the construction and use of these spaces? Environmental context also shaped the architecture of Tainiaro. Situated on volcanic ridges, the site commands sweeping views of fertile valleys and distant peaks, integrating natural topography into its design. The choice of location implies not only practical considerations such as defensibility or visibility, but also symbolic significance. A place elevated above the ordinary landscape, bridging the human and the divine. How did the natural environment inform ritual practices, social interaction, or the organization of labor at Tainiaro? And how did the builders perceive the relationship between their constructed terraces and the surrounding mountains, rivers, and skies? Despite extensive study, many aspects of Tainiaro remain enigmatic. The absence of written records, the complexity of the terraces, and the scale of construction leave unanswered questions about purpose, social organization, and symbolic meaning. Were the terraces primarily ceremonial, residential, or political? How did communities transmit construction techniques, ritual knowledge, and social norms across generations in a society without writing? And what remains hidden beneath centuries of vegetation, volcanic sediment, and erosion, waiting to reveal new layers of understanding about this remarkable site? Walking the terraces today, one is struck by the interplay of scale, precision, and landscape. The monumental stones, the linear alignments, and the interconnected terraces speak to a culture capable of organizing labor, envisioning complex designs, and engaging deeply with both environment and cosmos. Each stone seems to carry both practical and symbolic weight, a material reflection of the beliefs, skills, and ambitions of the people who constructed it. How did those who built Tainiaro experience the space? Were they motivated by spiritual awe, communal obligation, or a vision of society itself? And how did successive generations reinterpret these terraces, maintaining continuity while leaving room for cultural evolution? Tainiaro also invites reflection on the universality of human creativity and the impulse to transform the landscape. Across continents and millennia, from La Bastida to Gunung Padang to Dadiwan, we see echoes of similar ambitions: to organize space, assert identity, honor the dead, or negotiate the sacred and the social. Yet, Tainiaro's scale, complexity, and tropical environment make it unique, a testament to human ingenuity in a context both challenging and inspiring. Could comparable megastructures elsewhere in the Pacific, now lost or undiscovered, reveal networks of cultural exchange or shared symbolic practices across vast distances? And what does this imply about the cognitive and social capacities of prehistoric societies often dismissed as primitive? Standing atop Tainiaro, gazing across terraces that stretch into misty valleys, one is reminded of the sheer persistence and vision required to create such a site. Every block, every alignment, every carefully constructed platform speaks to the human desire to order the world, communicate across generations, and leave a mark upon the landscape that transcends individual lives. And yet, for all its grandeur, the site retains an aura of mystery. The deeper purpose of its terraces, the full meaning of its alignments, and the stories of the people who labored here remain partially hidden, waiting for those patient enough to uncover them. Tainiaro, like the other sites we have visited, demonstrates that prehistoric architecture was not merely functional. It was expressive, symbolic, and profoundly human. Its terraces bridge the mundane and the extraordinary, the practical and the spiritual, the seen and the unseen. And as the tropical wind stirs the leaves across these ancient stones, we are left with a quiet, lingering question. What further knowledge, cultural insight, and social understanding remain buried within Tainiaro's terraces, waiting for discovery, reflection, and interpretation by those willing to listen to the whispers of a civilization that shaped its world with remarkable ambition and vision? From the expansive terraces and monumental alignments of Tainiaro, where stone and topography converge in a display of human ingenuity, our exploration now carries us across the Eurasian continent to the rolling steppes of what is today Bashkortostan, Russia. Here lies the Muradymovo circular enclosures, a cluster of enigmatic prehistoric earthworks that rise from the grasslands with an understated majesty. Unlike the soaring terraces of Tainiaro, or the carefully planned complexes of Dadiwan, Muradymovo is defined by its subtle yet deliberate geometry. Circular and elliptical embankments, often accompanied by ditches or concentric rings, forming shapes that are best appreciated from above. From the ground, the enclosures appear as gentle undulations, almost indistinct from the surrounding terrain, yet their precise symmetry hints at human design and intentionality that continues to captivate archaeologists and historians alike. Approaching Muradymovo, one is struck by the quiet scale of the site. Broad, low ridges rise only a few meters above the steppe, yet extend for hundreds of meters in perfect arcs. The enclosures vary in diameter, some forming single rings, others multiple concentric circles. Unlike monumental stonework elsewhere, the primary material here is earth, compacted soil, occasionally reinforced with timber or stone in ways now mostly lost to time. At first glance, these circular forms seem almost natural, shaped by the land itself, but closer inspection reveals their unmistakable geometry, a deliberate human hand imposing order on the open steppe. How did communities achieve such precision without modern tools or surveying techniques? And what purpose drove them to shape the earth in these elegant, repetitive forms? Archaeological studies place the construction of Muradymovo roughly between 3,500 BC and 2,500 BC, situating it within the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age of the Eurasian steppe. This dating is based on stratigraphy, radiocarbon samples from associated hearths, and artifacts recovered from the enclosures, including stone tools, pottery fragments, and occasional ritual items. Yet the exact chronology remains debated, with some evidence suggesting earlier or overlapping phases of construction. Was Muradymovo the product of a single community's vision, or the cumulative effort of multiple generations responding to changing social, ritual, or environmental pressures? And how might the function and meaning of these enclosures have evolved over time? The purpose of Muradymovo remains enigmatic. Excavations reveal minimal evidence of permanent habitation within the enclosures, yet signs of human activity, fire pits, post holes, and dispersed artifacts suggest intermittent use. Were these spaces primarily ceremonial, intended for gatherings, rites, or seasonal festivals? Or did they serve as markers of territorial claim, signaling the presence and influence of a group within the vast expanses of the steppe? The absence of domestic structures raises further questions. Were these circular forms designed for transient occupation, for ritual specialists, or for large communal assemblies that left only ephemeral traces? The geometry of the enclosures adds another layer of intrigue. Many rings exhibit near-perfect circularity, sometimes accompanied by smaller outer rings or radial ditches. The precision is remarkable given the Neolithic context. The builders had no compasses, GPS, or advanced surveying instruments. How did they measure, align, and maintain the circular forms across such expansive distances? Did they rely on simple tools, visual markers, or astronomical observation? And if astronomical alignment was involved, which celestial bodies or cycles were considered significant? Solstices, equinoxes, or the movements of prominent stars? Some researchers propose that the enclosures may have functioned as early ritual landscapes, where the shape, orientation, and scale of the circles were symbolic in themselves. Concentric rings could denote hierarchical or cosmological concepts, while the spacing and proportion of the enclosures might encode cultural knowledge about social organization, seasonal cycles, or cosmology. Could these earthworks have served as a bridge between the human and spiritual worlds, a space where the invisible order of the cosmos was reflected in the visible order of the land? And if so, what beliefs or practices guided their construction and use? The scale of labor required to create Muradymovo is modest in comparison to the massive stone constructions of Tainiaro or Gunung Padang. Yet it is significant within the context of small Neolithic steppe communities. The movement, compaction, and shaping of Earth require coordination, planning, and sustained effort. How were these tasks organized? Were there leaders directing construction, specialized laborers, or collective communal workdays that reinforced social cohesion? And what motivated communities to invest such labor in a site that, on the surface, appears devoid of permanent habitation or immediate material return? Artifacts recovered from the surrounding area offer tantalizing but inconclusive clues. Stone tools, flint blades, and pottery shards suggest daily life nearby, yet within the enclosures themselves, finds are sparse. Some archaeologists interpret this as evidence of ritual exclusivity, where only select participants were allowed to enter and engage in ceremonial activity. Others suggest that perishable materials, wood, textiles, or organic offerings, have vanished, leaving behind only the durable soil formations. What might these lost materials have revealed about the practices, symbolism, or social dynamics of the people who constructed these circles? Environmental context also shapes our understanding of Muradymovo. The site occupies gently rolling plains, often near rivers or natural resources, suggesting strategic placement within a landscape that offered sustenance and connectivity. Visibility across the steppe may have been a deliberate factor, allowing the circular forms to be recognized from a distance, whether by neighboring communities or by participants approaching the site for ritual purposes. How did the natural setting inform the placement, orientation, and function of these enclosures? And to what extent did the builders consider both ecological and symbolic factors in their planning? Comparative studies deepen the mystery. Similar circular and elliptical enclosures appear across Eurasia, from the Pontic-Caspian steppes to the forest steppe of central Russia. Are these patterns the result of independent invention, or do they hint at shared cultural knowledge transmitted across long distances? Could Muradymovo represent a localized expression of a broader architectural and ritual tradition spanning the prehistoric steppe? And if so, what networks, social, cultural, or symbolic, enabled these early communities to create sites that resonate with striking geometric precision across vast landscapes? The human dimension of Muradymovo is compelling. Imagine Neolithic communities arriving seasonally or intermittently, carrying tools, food, and offerings to the circular enclosures. Perhaps they processed ritual fires in the center of each ring, or arranged symbolic items along the circumference. Perhaps ceremonies marked transitions of the year, life cycle events, or agreements between clans. How did the people experience the space? Were the circles awe-inspiring, humbling, or empowering? And how did repeated visits, construction, and use shape collective memory and cultural identity across generations? Even after decades of study, many questions remain unresolved. The precision, purpose, and social significance of Muradymovo's circular enclosures continue to elude definitive explanation. Were they primarily ceremonial, political, or astronomical? How did the builders achieve geometric accuracy without written plans or advanced instruments? And what other enclosures, lost to erosion, agriculture, or time, might lie undiscovered, offering further insight into the sophisticated and imaginative capabilities of these prehistoric communities? Standing among the low ridges of Muradymovo today, one senses both intimacy and grandeur. The enclosures are not monumental in the way of stone terraces or Cyclopean walls, yet they communicate careful design, deliberate labor, and the invisible presence of generations of human activity. Each curve of the embankment, each measured gap, each concentric ring embodies both practical knowledge and symbolic intent, leaving traces of belief, social organization, and human vision that endure through millennia. How did those who shaped these circles conceive of space, time, and society? And how did the memory of their work persist, influencing later communities across the Eurasian steppe? across the Muradymovo, like the other sites we have explored, demonstrates that prehistoric architecture was not simply functional. It was expressive, symbolic, and socially meaningful. The circular enclosures reveal a culture attuned to geometry, landscape, and collective action, capable of transforming the earth itself into a canvas for ritual, identity, and communication. And as the wind sweeps across the open steppe, rustling grasses over the concentric rings, one is left with a lingering question. What deeper social structures, ritual knowledge, and symbolic practices remain hidden within these low ridges, waiting for patient observers to uncover the enduring story of Muradymovo and the people who shaped it millennia ago?